Clerk will call the roll.
Lynn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2. Gary Pickens, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by our own Tom Spencer, hobbling as he may be. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we begin this meeting acknowledging your presence and power. We praise you because you are our creator, sustainer, and redeemer. We praise you as ruler of all things, and you never have to run for re-election. We praise and honor you because you have granted us eternal blessings. We give you thanks for this community and the privilege to serve. We give you thanks for high hopes and noble causes and for understanding of different views. We give thanks for all who have labored and suffered, who have toiled so that others might live in dignity and freedom. We ask that you provide protection for our loved ones, both near and far. We ask that you provide comfort and healing for those in need. Amid the questions and confusion of the day, we ask for discernment and wisdom. Help us to follow your example of a selfless servant and make decisions for those who we serve. Make us worthy to serve our fellow men. For it's in Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Tom.
Morning, Devin.
Good
Welcome
morning,
back,
everybody. Sorry I missed the roll call, but I would like to mark this present.
See here.
Okay, members of court, just a couple of agenda items. The first one is under transportation. This is item 9I1. It's the plat approval on Bella Flora Phase number 7. We're going to hold that for 1 week, and we'll bring that back to court, actually on the 29th, which is part of our second announcement. The 22nd, which is next Tuesday, we will not be holding court. Our next court meeting is on the 29th of September. At that time, you're going to be able to look at and pass the special budgets on the 29th, so I know that budget will have that information to you prior to the meeting. Also, as we go through the meeting this morning, we're going to take several things out of order. The first one is we will be giving a presentation as it relates to alternate dispute resolution services. I think we have one information sheet on that. I believe that it is a read into the record. And then we will go into the public health presentation and then into the county administrator section.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of September the 8th. Move approval.
Second.
We have 2 motions, 2 seconds, so you can figure it out. Please vote. Okay, Commissioner Fickus, you need to push your light. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We have a couple of proclamations this week. The first one I'm going to go ahead and read because even though they're not here, I've been told that they are listening. And so this is on the Direct Support for Professionals Recognition Week. Whereas the National Association of Direct Support Professionals is a North American campaign to recognize the extensive work of local direct support professionals. And whereas we celebrate the direct support professionals who provide daily assistance to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in day programs and group homes throughout Tarrant County. And whereas direct support professionals assist with living skills such as bathing, dressing, encouraging friendships, helping with household chores, providing transportation and medications. And whereas direct support professionals strive for people to be independent and productive, offering advice, making important life decisions. And whereas direct support professionals strengthen community inclusion for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, finding volunteer work and leisure activities. And whereas direct support professionals have provided critical services on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby proclaim September 13th through 19th, 2020, Direct Support Professionals Recognition Week in Tarrant County. Be it further resolved that we urge that Tarrant County citizens recognize the sometimes difficult and also joyous work of the direct support professionals as contributory to our community, in witness whereof we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 15th day of September 2020. I move its approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Brooks?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a resolution this morning honoring a very unique partnership in our community. That partnership is between the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office and the Potter's House, Fort Worth. One of the most civically engaged congregations in Fort Worth. When I was asked to issue this resolution, I agreed without thought to the fact that this is an election season and that it might have political consequences. Some things you do just because they're the right thing to do, regardless of politics. So here we go. Whereas the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office Christmas for Children of the Incarcerated Community Outreach Initiative lessens the devastation experienced due to parental absence by helping families connect, build relationships, and provide children with much needed joy. And whereas children of the incarcerated can live lonely lives, and incarcerated individuals find themselves feeling isolated, abandoned, and unable to provide for their families. And whereas being able to offer gifts to children of incarcerated parents provides a glimpse of hope and normalcy into the circle of family relations. And whereas through the efforts of Christmas for Children of the Incarcerated, 800 children celebrated Christmas in 2019 with the help of dedicated sponsors and caring community partners. And whereas Christmas for Children of the Incarcerated is an effective tool in helping individuals stay in contact with their families during incarceration, which can contribute to reducing recidivism rates. And whereas Christmas for Children of the Incarcerated was made possible by the Potter's House, Fort Worth, Mount Olive Baptist Church, Toys for Tots, and many of other family support groups and public assistance agencies whose impact will remain as a central element of the continued success of the Tarrant County community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners' Court of Tarrant County, do hereby congratulate the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office Christmas for Children of the Incarcerated Community Outreach Initiative for its distinguished and commendable service to the Tarrant County community, and we extend our best wishes for continued success in all future endeavors. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 15th day of September 2020. And let me just add that I was present on that day just before Christmas in 2019 when this event was held at the Potter's House, Fort Worth. And to watch the interaction between the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office and the pastor, staff, and membership of the Potter's House, Fort Worth, as they provided joy to children of the incarcerated, was an uplifting experience. I move approval of this resolution.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Here this morning to accept the resolution are Chief Roy Kerbin, Inmate Services, Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, my brother, Pastor Patrick E. Winfield of the Potter's House, Fort Worth, Tiffany Brinkley, the Potter's House, Fort Worth, and Dan Varnador of Toys for Tots. Would you all meet me at the podium, please?
And I think the sheriff is also...
And Sheriff Wayburn.
I'd like to thank all the commissioners, specifically Commissioner Brooks, for your kindness. About a year and a half ago, the sheriff tasked me into reaching out to all these children with the thought in mind that they should have a good Christmas too. And I met some of the most fantastic people in the world. I'd like to have 30 or 40 people up here, but of course we can't do that. We know your time is limited, but allow me to introduce some very, very special people. From the Potter's House, we had a gentleman that served the United States successfully as a sergeant in the Army overseas in combat, who did a superb job on organization and help, Mr. Angel Cordero. Sir. Someone with spectacular organizing ability, who has a heart bigger than Texas. Someone I think everyone should know, Miss Tiffany Brinkley. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Dan Vonador from the United States Marine Corps and his wonderful wife Diana spread joy throughout Christmas for tens of thousands of children in this area in Toys for Tot. God bless you and thank you for being here. And last and not least, the incredible pastor, Patrick E. Winfield II, so beautifully introduced by our commissioner, is an amazing man doing an amazing job for an uncountable number of people in need. And what a job he did for all those children. God bless you, Pastor. And I'm going to introduce a man that needs no introduction. This was his dream. A year and a half ago, he talked to me about this. This is Bill Wayburn's dream, and our two incredible chaplains, Frank Lidke and Wes McDuffie, reached out to churches across our county to help make this true. They did a phenomenal job, our two chaplains, But the gentleman that started it all was Sheriff Bill Williams, sir.
Do what?
Before we go there,
Yes.
let me present this.
Yes, sir.
Y'all gather
Well,
around.
all put your mask on.
Front yard. We know you have to do for you.
I don't want to say a whole lot because I know that you guys have a lot on the docket, but I would just say thank you very much. I appreciate all of the work that is done in the Tarrant County area by all of its leadership, both elected and civic and religious, and we endeavor to be able to help people's lives. I want everybody to be reminded of the fact that people's lives are being forever impacted by the pandemic that we're in, by the social unrest that we are presently in, and it's going to take all of us to be able to help people's lives better. And so it is all of our responsibilities to do that, and so we do that with a willing heart, a heart of service, heart of leadership, and certainly the heart of God. So thank you guys so much for this, and thank you so much, Sheriff, for this opportunity, and Commissioner Brooks, thank you so much for seeing it through. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just real brief. Thank you all, commissioners. We're doing it again this year. It is our belief that when all the big people stand up in the room, our children are protected first, and we must continue on that line of service. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank y'all again very much for that. Commissioner Allen, it's good to have you back with us
Yes,
today.
thank you. Well, I did just want to share with everyone that it is very good to be back, even if it's virtually. I do look forward to being back in person as soon as I can. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the medical team that helped me through what has certainly been a journey of patience and humility for any of you that have had serious medical issues that you had to have addressed. Of course, my family, my friends, the Precinct 2 team, my colleagues in GK, all the other elected officials and department heads that kept my team in the loop. And of course, for the constituents and residents, the constituents of Precinct 2 and the residents of Tarrant County, I sincerely appreciate all the kind notes and well wishes that were sent my way. And I may not be able to respond to all of them. I'm doing my best to do that. But please do know that I thank you for your patience and your understanding. Of course, I still am in recovery. That's part of the reason why I'm working remotely. And so even in the course of our proceedings today, you may see me go off screen. That's just for me to, I'll still be listening to the proceedings, and I'll of course be present for the votes, but I may go off screen just for my own comfort and to ensure that I can make it through the remainder of the meeting. So again, I just want to thank everybody, and it's really good to be back.
Welcome back. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval.
For approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen, you're getting into this yes real good.
I'm just keeping my mouse cursor hovered over the mic, so I can just do nothing real quick.
Public hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have one public hearing this morning. This concerns the 2015 through 2019 five-year consolidated plan. Ms. Ward is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're requesting the Commissioners Court to conduct a public hearing to hear public comments on the amendment number 2 to the 15th through 19th five-year consolidated plan regarding the home investment partnership funds. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow us to use home funds for tenant-based rental assistance allowable through our overall plan. So we're here to receive comments, and I'll leave it to you.
This time I'll open the public hearing and see if there's anyone here willing to or wishing to make any comment regarding this matter. There appearing to be none, then we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No action at this time.
Not at this time, Your Honor. Your Honor, we can now go to the briefing items, and if we could do item number B, I believe it's number B, it's the alternate dispute resolution services presentation, and ask Mr. Schaffner to come forward and address the court.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Commissioner Allen, it's great to see you again. All right, so wanted to brief the court, as previously discussed last month, regarding the state of the Tarrant County Alternative Dispute Resolution Program. A lot of work has been done with stakeholders, and we're going to present this morning to you a program that is the two pieces to move forward with. So let's just keep that in mind, that there's two portions of this in order to have the dispute resolution program that the county needs going forward further. So just a brief overview. Section 152 of the Texas Civil Procedures and Remedies Code specifically authorizes counties to create alternative dispute resolution programs, and I think how the statute defines an ADRS system is really, really good. And I'll actually read it. ADRS is defined as an informal forum in which mediation, conciliation, or arbitration is used to resolve disputes among individuals, entities, and units of government, including those having an ongoing relationship such as relatives, neighbors, landlords, and tenants, employees and employers, and merchants and consumers. And I think that the definition as laid out in statute really gives the broad range of what we're looking to set up within our county, to where it's not only a system to support the courts, but a system that allows for peaceful and voluntary resolution of disputes within our community as a whole. A note about financing. So Section 152.004 allows the system to be financed with a fee on certain cases that are filed in civil court as well as JP. The statutory limit on the civil cases filed is $15. Tarrant County Commissioners Court has chosen a fee of $12 instead of the maximum of $15. And then you can also assess up to $5 a case filing for JP courts, but Commissioners Court has decided not to do that at this time. So no case fee on JP courts and $12 on certain civil court cases. Historically, revenue has been around $425,000 to $450,000 a year. Estimated revenue for FY 2021 is $409,800. So the two initial programs, again, this is two pieces to fit together to really solve some issues that we have within our community. First is a Tarrant County Alternative Dispute Resolution Program. And then we are looking to take action on that in a special purpose budget approval on September 29th. So that'll be in 2 Tuesdays. And then a COVID-19 mediation clinic. And the mediation clinic, what we're going to suggest in the next couple slides, is something that our community needs to be stood up immediately. It is an immediate community need. So the mediation clinic, COVID-19 has greatly impacted our community, as we all know. And one of the ways that it has greatly impacted us is that we have a number of disputes that have started to occur, whether they're tenant-landlord, whether they're debt collector disputes, or a number of different issues out there that have been driven and created by COVID-19's effects within our community. From working with stakeholders, it's essential that we need a low-cost dispute alternative available for our community to help speed that recovery along. And so what we're looking at doing is standing up a COVID-19 mediation clinic. This, again, would be a clinic specifically targeted for disputes related to the effects of COVID-19. And then, again, working with stakeholders, the mediation clinic would also include an eviction deferral program. And so what we're hoping to do with that is that for an initial contract of 3 months for October, November, and December of this year, we would have community development work with various stakeholders to start resolving issues through mediation. Landlord and tenants would be encouraged to begin lease-related disputes at the mediation clinic before they file anything at court, which I think that's an important piece of that, is that we would be encouraging everyone through a community outreach program to be coming to the clinic to resolve disputes before they actually get to court. No mediation costs to any party if mediated through the clinic, as long as they can display that this was caused by COVID-19 or impacted by COVID-19, such as job loss, sick family member, those type of issues, as long as we can demonstrate that. We would also be working with partners for an extensive community outreach program to make sure that everybody is aware that this is there, that this program that the county set up is there. And then we'd work with the county courts to work with them to refer evictions to the clinic. And again, it would be a free of cost program.
When you say county courts, you mean your JP courts?
Yes, county courts, JP courts, yes, sir. Since those are where the evictions are filed. So that's the first piece, which is that in the immediate need of our community, we would be working and wanting to get consensus from the court to work to find a service provider that would be able to stand up an immediate COVID-19 mediation clinic to meet the needs of our community and be able to do so by hopefully by October 1. So that's the first piece of this item that we're looking at today. The second part, which is kind of a long-term process, or longer-term process, which is to create a program that offers an affordable means to address disputes through voluntary and peaceful resolutions. Setting up an alternative dispute resolution program in-house within the county that would meet the mediation needs of the community for a longer-term means. So we have some specific program goals that we've been working on in order to meet as well as community needs. Developing and implementing an ADRS program that meets the needs of our community through partnerships, innovative program development, and rigorous evaluation. Working and making sure that we have high-quality, accessible training programs for mediation. Again, working on that voluntary and peaceful mediation of disputes. And through an abundant community engagement program, developing a culture, and this is developing a culture within our community of voluntary and peaceful dispute resolution, which I think is an important component to this, that as we've drilled down into the needs of our community and other programs across the state and country, that's been an important component of what we've been looking at. And then specific needs in the community to be addressed, having affordable mediation options that are accessible, and making sure that we have sufficient wraparound services for our community members to where what their needs may be, whether they're a pro se litigant or they do go to mediation but need some help on documentation, that we can work through those and make sure that everyone has the needs that those needs are being met. So continuing the outline and looking a little bit at the budget requests that we'll be making, the special purpose budget. So looking to bring the ADR services in-house. They'll be housed under the county administrator's office. The program will have no impact on the general fund. So this is in the special purpose budget, so it's not taxpayer funded through property taxes. It's through a specific fee in our court system, as previously outlined. In staffing, initially we're recommending 2 positions, a director position and a case manager scheduler position. and then one project position of legal secretary, somebody that can come in and make sure that knows the system and knows the legal system in the county to handle all those types of filings. And we have a proposed budget of $409,800 to where it is balanced with a reserve. So going through certain aspects of the program, we have been working closely with the Texas A&M Law School to develop programs using their mediation team and department at the law school to find ways that they can facilitate and make this system better. And so we're going to proposing working with them on assistance with the actual development of the program. They've been doing that, and we're hoping to continue that along. Assistance with training, and working under supervision of attorneys, student assistants to participating parties as they draft proposed agreements through mediation, and then assistance in setting up an evaluation system. So we're also proposing an advisory committee. So the Commissioners Court will create and appoint an advisory committee under this program. The advisory committee would advise the Commissioners Court on the development of the program, assist the program with actively engaging Tarrant County community in developing outreach programs, whether it be to the community for mediators or spreading the word about the program and how to access it. So the suggested committee composition is as follows: members from the Commissioners Court representative, a Justice of Peace representative, County Court of Law representative, District Family Court representative, Juvenile Services representative, DRO, Law School, Tarrant County Bar representative, Tarrant County Family Law Bar representative, and 3 community representatives, trying to cut a broad swath of the parties that will actually be using and trying to make sure that their needs are heard and have the ability to develop this program out to meet the full needs of our county, not just within the court system, but also within our community as a whole. So mechanics, generally how would this program work? So the director will work with current volunteer mediators and recruit qualified mediators from the community and maintain a database of accessible mediators, or accessible and available mediators. The Commissioners Court will set a fee schedule for the mediations and a per-party fee. The TCADRP will recommend policies and procedures to evaluate a party's ability to pay and subsidize those parties that cannot pay according to the fee schedule. So let's say the Commissioners Court sets a community mediation. So this is, let's say, you've got 2 neighbors, a tree branch falls on a fence, and neither one wants to sue the other one, but they both feel like they owe something to each other. Or one party thinks they owe something, the other doesn't. Instead of going to court, they could come to the mediation program. Well, if one of those parties is unable to pay the per-party fee for the mediation, let's say hypothetically $50 a party, then the program, the TCADRP, will have a sliding scale for an ability to pay, to where if, according to the sliding scale, if the person can pay $25, then they would pay that $25, and the county would make up the additional amount through a subsidy, which we have budgeted through the budget program. So we would have that sliding fee schedule to where everybody would be able to have access to the fees, to the mediation, regardless of whether or not their ability to pay the fee. And then also, very importantly, the per-party fees would be paid directly to the mediator at the time of mediation, and if they do need assistance for a lack of ability to pay, those funds would come through a county process in order to remit those payments to that mediator. So a dispute does not need to be filed in court to utilize the program as we're discussing. As the example that I just gave, we're not looking at having to where you've got to file in court and then the judge sends you to mediation. We're hoping to create a program that is vibrant and robust and able to catch cases and situations before they even get to the level of court, being filed in a court. And again, the director will work with community members, judges, and departments to tailor programs to the specific needs of the community and communities served by those programs. So to go over a timeline, So we've set forward a 4-month timeline. So in September, we'll develop the clinic and eviction deferral program. Again, reaching out to a service provider who can stand that up and hopefully get that worked out very quickly. September 29th, whenever the Commissioners Court approves the special purpose budget, that you all would approve the FY21 one-year proposal in that budget. And then we'll continue with stakeholder input to the TC80RP program in October. We will be posting the positions to the website. Again, those are the 3 positions: a director, a scheduler, and then a legal secretary. Stand up a COVID-19 mediation clinic, actually stand that up and have it start operating. Finalize the law school partnership. We're proposing having monthly briefings to Commissioners Court so that we can make sure everyone is aware of what is going on as we do develop these 2 programs and implement them. And we're hoping by the end of October to actually hire the program director. In November, we are proposing setting up the first advisory committee meeting. Part of that meeting, as well as through the director and working with Commissioners Court, set mediator standards, processes, and procedures for the department. Again, have another briefing to the Commissioners Court, and we begin mediator recruitment program. And then finally, in December, we begin voluntary and peaceful resolution processes through TC80RP, another monthly briefing, and an evaluation of the continuation of the COVID-19 mediation clinic. So, Judge, Commissioners, that ends my presentation. Happy to take any questions, work through any items.
Just a comment. I think this COVID-19 mediation clinic is essential. I would like to see it ready to begin operations by the 1st of October. Gives us 2 weeks from today to get the thing stood up. It would be one more tool in our toolbox to deal with landlord-tenant relations, disputes, with an eye towards making our landlords whole and keeping our tenants housed. I am passionate about COVID-19 not being allowed to create a new class of homeless people in our community. And I think this would be a big help.
One of the things that I think you might want to consider, I mean, in the past, our dispute resolutions may not have been as something that we utilized within our JP courts, obviously with this evictions, part of it being in there. Also with their increased jurisdiction,
yes,
my understanding that now they're going to be handling a lot of the credit card potential cases.
Yes, sir.
I would suggest that we consider, or you consider, whether or not we should expand or extend that fee, which we have not been utilizing, for $5 a case to that area. To again, I believe that with regards to the COVID-19, to the extent that we have proven that it was a COVID-19 related expense, that should be something we're looking at for the CARES Act.
Yes, sir.
And we should be doing that.
Yes.
It's my understanding that we've got about 200 people who are volunteering. By the 29th, I hope that you have at least had some communication with them to get their feelings, their thoughts, their ideas on how to put together what you're talking about putting together. And when we see the presentation on the 29th, that we'll have some stuff included in that.
So what we're doing, we've already begun discussing with Dispute Resolution Services, them to maybe be the contractee on those 3 months, and so that we'll be able to utilize their mediators and they will coordinate that activity. Just like to advise the court also that there is, there hasn't been a payment to DRS, and we're working with the district attorney's office and with the executive director of DRS. We want to bring that to a conclusion and come forward with a solution by the 29th also.
Because it's my understanding they have been doing work for this past year. I don't know when they received their last payment. It's my understanding that judges may still have been sending cases to them.
So what happened, Your Honor, they continued to do cases. You might remember we were in litigation at a particular time as related to the contracting aspects of DRS or ADRS. And so I talked with the executive director last week and asked her to send me the monthly activity reports. Of course, they've been affected by COVID just like everyone else, and they are doing virtual mediations now, and we received those reports yesterday morning. And so we're going to go through that. We're going to go take a good look at those numbers, and we agree they have been mediating, and we need to compensate them for that mediation.
Okay, but back to my original statement regarding seeking out advice from the volunteer. It's great to take care of the ones or to get advice from the current administrative folks over there, but what I hear you saying is you're talking about setting up another area within the county.
Yes, sir.
And so I would like for you to be sure and have communicated with the volunteers between now and the 29th.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Judge. Thanks for the update, Russell. Some of my questions have already been answered, and I appreciate you for updating on the issue.
Hold on just a second.
So I think that, Commissioner, if you have both your computer speaker on and your cell phone, we're going to get feedback. So if you have one or the other, I think we won't pick up the feedback.
Do you have both the cell phone?
No, I do not. This has been an ongoing issue, so can you all not hear me?
Try now, Devin. Try now.
Is JD muted?
So I think what we're going to do is just ask the Commissioner to call, and we're going to reach out to her so she can have her comments on the record.
We'll get your comments in just a minute.
We do have one audience participation form. It's a comment only.
Would you like to read that into the record?
If you would like, I would be more than happy to. Maybe by that time we can get Commissioner Allen's mic fixed. Okay, this is from Annette Smith. And it concerns the Tarrant County Alternate Dispute Resolution System discussion. The mediation programs operated by Dispute Resolution Services of North Texas, Inc. meets the goals and objectives proposed. Developing a new ADR provider not only wastes valuable time but also wastes taxpayer money. It is concerning that volunteers are paid, that the advisory committee is mostly appointed legal and governmental officials, that there is no method for hearing complaints by dissatisfied clients, that it excludes family mediation, that juvenile victim offender mediation services will cease, and that the law school is paid $75,000 for training.
Please take that into account as you're moving forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not, let's see, Commissioner Allen, you want to try one more time?
Is this any better?
Yes, so far.
Okay. I'm going to call in, but just for the purpose of this, so that we can move on from this agenda item, I just wanted to say that I had received a number of concerns in my office about the DRS payment issues. So, GK, thank you for that update. I just wanted to make sure I understood that with the COVID clinic, or we're just evaluating DRS as a prospective provider, right? Or are there others?
We are looking at going out and
You're going to be talking with DRS directly on being the provider for that particular service.
correct.
Okay, very good. And then wanted to make sure I understood the timeline for the advisory committee for the other mediation. Let's see, what was that?
The TCAD.
I know you walked through the timeline, but when would there be the first meeting of the advisory committee? I think I missed that.
So we have it scheduled for November.
Okay.
So because we would like to get the director hired.
Okay,
and then bring in the advisory committee right after that, and then get those recommendations to Commissioners Court by the end of November.
So then, what happens in the interim between now and in November? What happens with those mediation needs?
So within the current mediation needs, we'll have the COVID-19 mediation clinic that will handle anything related to COVID-19. And we'll continue handling anything related to COVID-19. We're hoping to, because it'll be October and November, that it's going to take for us to stand up the internal department to continue on. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag time there. But hopefully DRS will still be able to take some of those cases as we do move on. And a point of clarification maybe regarding the juvenile services aspect, because we do, historically there have been about 75 juvenile services mediations, year 75 to 80. Those are currently being, those mediations are still ongoing, and those have actually, the mediation process has been brought in-house under Benny's group, and they've been doing a really fantastic job, making lemonade out of lemons.
So it is not true that the juvenile mediations will cease?
Correct. That is not, they have been ongoing since March.
We have internal staff in juvenile that are mediators also, and they're conducting those mediations. In talking with the Director of Juvenile Services, they seem to be going very well.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. I'm going to go ahead and call in. Hopefully that'll be better. Thanks.
I don't know. You're doing pretty good right now.
Okay, we'll stick with it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all.
Any other questions? Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Your Honor, now we could go to the public health presentation and ask Mr. Tenage to come up and do his presentation.
Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the court.
Good morning.
Commissioner Alley, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Vinny. I appreciate you for keeping me updated every single day.
Yes, ma'am. I promised I won't let you miss a beat.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So we'll go through our public health briefing again on emerging health issues. First off, I've got some good news on West Nile. We had a rain front that was pretty strong move through with some cold weather behind it. And as you can see, our mosquito data started to drop pretty significantly. If you just noticed the week before, we had declined and then we were starting to trend up for like 2 or 3 weeks. And as you can see, the positivity rate on the left, the top corner, has dropped significantly in this last week. On the right, the vector index did the same thing. It had sort of bounced off a line that we watch, if you will, and now it's below that significantly. Similar things happened in northeast part of Tarrant County that had been the hotbed of activity with the West Nile positive mosquito pools. Data has dropped significantly there as well on both charts that we watch. So what does that mean? That currently we don't see a need to go do aerial spraying. But again, this is too early past the weather front. It does disrupt the West Nile breeding cycle, the mosquito breeding cycle, especially when there's cold weather at night. But, adult mosquitoes are still around, so our ground game still has to be strong. So our city partners and vendors are going to continue ground spraying. We do ask that our residents, they participate in spraying their backyards and doing all the necessary things, emptying standing water, using dunks to prevent more mosquitoes from breeding and so forth. Continue to wear DEET. All of those efforts hopefully will have an impact. But if we see the data bounce back up, just like we started to see a couple of weeks ago, then we'll come back and reevaluate and hopefully pull the trigger on that aerial spraying. We do appreciate the court's blessing to have that authorization, that if the need be there, we'll certainly proceed. But for now, we're just kind of in a wait and watch pattern to see what happens with this data.
Well, I fogged my back porch a couple of times this weekend. They had a convention on my back porch.
Yes, sir. They did come out. I did spray my backyard and the whole area. So, yeah, it helps. If you,
I fogged the porch and sprayed the yard.
Yes, sir. So we'll go on to situational awareness for COVID-19. 29 million cases worldwide, 927,000 deaths. So U.S. is still leading, unfortunately, at 6.5 million cases. But the big story is India has been experiencing a explosive outbreak. I mean, close to 100,000 cases a day. They're at about 4.9 million cases. I fully expect India to take over and be the lead country. The difference-wise, they're about 3.5 times the population for U.S. So we still are unfortunately disproportionately impacted. In U.S., we have 194,000 deaths. Good news is that the trend has been slowing down in the United States all across, so that's great. Texas, no exception, 663,000 cases. We're about 10% of the U.S. load, 14,000 deaths. Now, the big thing is DSHS went through, you heard all the issues related to positivity rate. Judge has been talking about their inability to absorb data and the testing information being inaccurate and so forth. They've done a good job of cleaning that up over this weekend. And I'll get into some of the details, but one of the side effects of that is, unfortunately, Tarrant County's testing number dropped to 332,000. Earlier this week, last week I reported 340-some thousand, but as I think Monday morning, we were up to 370,000 and it's come back down. The explanation is that they've deduplicated some of the data and eliminated faxed-in reports and other paper copies and other things that may have reached in. They're relying solely on electronically reported data from labs. And they eliminated that parking category where it was like county yet to be assigned. They have assigned all the counties after deduplicating the data. So as you can see, there are only, out of 5.6 million tests, only 76,000 or so remained with an unknown county. Everything else has been assigned. Harris County seems to have bumped quite a bit to over 1 million tests, but we're a little bit behind. We're number 4 still, but that means more work is to be done. I see some questions.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Texas is approximately 10% of the national cases.
Yes, sir.
Are we 10% of the national population?
A little bit less. We're about 29 million national population. I think 330 million. So we're 8%, somewhere. Yes, sir.
So it's not that disproportionate.
No, it's not. Yes, sir. And then Tarrant County situation, 45,000 plus cases. I think this morning we're going to report about 440 plus cases. It's a little bit of a bump up. I mean, we've been holding close to 200, so things are starting to pick up post Labor Day. Death count is about, I think this morning we're going to have another 3 more deaths reported, so 608 total, 39,000 plus recoveries. So things are okay, but I mean, I'd rather not have the little uptick that we're starting to see. Going back to the U.S. charts, I just wanted to share that the decline.
I want to stop you for a second.
Yes,
I want to ask about the test numbers again.
Yes, sir.
Some companies are testing their employees every 3 weeks. So does that mean that every time they test, that shows up as another test? So those are not individuals those are just purely the number of tests that have been done?
My understanding is that it should have deduplicated data now, but I will pose that question to DSHS.
It should have what?
Deduplicated. So it should.
You mean you're taking the duplicates out?
Let me double check with DSHS because they sent out a note yesterday that had a lot of explanation, but it kind of was short on what they've done with this. And they put an asterisk, so to speak, like some counties may get less cases or less test numbers reported because we've cleaned up our data and are relying on electronic lab reports that go through their data quality check. Again, it came in late yesterday afternoon. I know yesterday I told you all in the morning that we were waiting for some explanation of what they've done. It did come, but it didn't answer all the questions. So I will ask them again on what happens when multiple times a test is run. Is this counted in the test numbers? Because it should be, right? I mean, what they're trying to eliminate is that the test got reported electronically and on a fax report. They don't want to count it twice because it's the same test. Right, so it will depend on the date the specimen was collected. And they have some charts to show how they've improved positivity and all that, and I'll kind of get into that. But I will ask your question because that's a valid. We had the same thought.
And I'm just going to say that as they prepare to move toward the legislature in January, I hope that y'all, the labs, the state, get together and figure out how you can clean up this mess. Because we've got people. I've talked with people who've gone and got a Abbott ID Now test and then went someplace else to a lab, or went to the lab and were told, well, it's going to be 72 hours or a week before, and so then they'd go someplace else and get another test. And so right there, you could have somebody that's 2 tests.
Yes, sir. So, the case count does not change. They are only counted as a case one time. Okay? So I want to be very clear on that. That part, local health departments are taking full care of deduplicating that data because that's kind of what we do every day. But the test count, if it's done on the same day, right, and then it might be, okay, they just got 2 tests for some reason. And I'll get into the details with them to find out what they're doing. But if it's on different dates, then it's a separate test that is run. The same person tests positive twice, that's okay, because they're just going to get counted as one case.
I wish that I could believe. Okay, stop with the clapping and stop with the stuff. I just find it these folks have not known what was up or down since we started this process.
Yes, sir.
I find it hard to believe that if somebody went and got an Abbott test at one location and then went to someplace else and it got sent to Quest or LabCorp, that they are sophisticated enough to figure it out.
Yes, sir. I understand what you're saying. I mean, it is possible, but they have made a huge effort in cleaning up and deduplicating the data. So that's what their note said yesterday. I can share that same email. It's as y'all begin to approach the legislature, I just want all the parties that are really involved in this, the state. I'd love for the local to be involved, but heaven forbid. But the state, the labs, and public health, or any place else that are doing these things, to try to figure out how we can make sure that we're getting valid information that we can rely on and that it doesn't change, or that we don't all of a sudden get hit with 1,500 new cases that date back as far as a month or 2 months. Yes, sir. I will pass that along, and I can tell you the organization that we're part of, TACHO, local health department members, we've been talking to DSHS on a variety of issues. Even before COVID, they had issues with their system. Part of that effort was educating them on the problems that we see at the local level. I mean, COVID has kind of brought it to light, but we've had issues during pertussis and other situations. Suddenly 300 cases show up that are 2 months old. What do we do with that? So they have actually gone to the legislature and got money allocated, but as IT projects were supposed to start, then COVID hit, and they kind of got caught when their systems were really not capable of doing it. I'm sure more money will be added to make sure their systems are up to speed. So,
Well,
but we'll carry on the message.
And in past years, we have gotten to the point of where the labs are not reporting anything but positive flu cases. Again, they're not doing that with tests. I hope that we can get to a situation of where we are accurately tabulating or accounting for tests as well as positive tests for flu and other things along that type lines.
So flu is not reportable currently? I mean, we can...
That's what to the legislature. So
Yes,
let's, again, I'd kind of like for the legislature to make that a reportable deal. Because
we can ask.
Well, I understand.
Yes, sir.
So what I guess I'm saying is ask.
Yes.
And let them tell us no, as opposed to, all the concern that they seem to have right before election season.
Yes, sir. So again, just kind of walking you quickly through the U.S. situational awareness. That graph seems to be trending down, so that's great news for the United States. And I wanted to point out Texas. We're in a significant decline right now, which is great. We're approaching levels just a tad bit above what we saw on Memorial Day, but this is great. Trend data, for the last several weeks has been down. Here's the latest positivity rate chart. So if this wasn't confusing enough to begin with, they have now 3 squiggly lines, if you will. The green line is what we've been seeing from DSHS. And I'll walk you through some of this, with a separate chart as well. What they finally explained, how their data got all goofy, because of how all the reporting works, they were taking all the total number of tests being reported by the labs as the denominator, and all the cases being reported by local health departments as the numerator. And of course, that didn't work out that well because it was kind of a positivity rate estimate, so to speak, not the most accurate way. Part of their problem was that their system was not able to absorb all the information being thrown at them. So that's how they ended up in that situation. What they've done is they've gone to the yellow line also, which is the by specimen collection date. And let me move on to show you that. This is the type of calculation that we do. So our positivity rate has, since the beginning, been following this calculation. And what it does is, let's on a given day, 100 tests are run, and 10 come back positive. So it's a very clean cut. On that date, the positivity rate was 10%. Now, is everything 100% reportable? People run rapid tests all the time and don't even have an electronic feed set up. It happens. It's not without its flaws. But that's the most accurate. Even in their own document, they acknowledge that's the most accurate way to show positivity rate. So they've done that. And what that shows you is we would have caught the surge early on the positivity rate because this happened right after 4th of July. I think this was the next week after 4th of July. So our data was showing us that, but the state data, if you go back, caught it the week, almost like early August, right? When we were our data is declining, state's up, what's going on? It was just a data delay that they had experienced because of how the data was being calculated. They've also added a third blue line, which I didn't separate out. We don't use it here locally, but it's based on the lab test date report. The day the lab reported the results, they're doing a calculation based on that. All in all, I would say every time we compare our stuff, finally now we have a comparable with the state of Texas, this yellow line, so we're going to look at that going forward. And if anybody has any detailed question, I can certainly bring back the other lines, but they get too confusing to look at.
Do you have a positivity rate index for Tarrant County?
Yes, sir. So we're at approximately 10%. If you really deep dive into the percentages, we're like a 9.4 or somewhere in that range. So we're back to about 10% positivity rate. So we're higher than where the state is. The state is at about 6.7%. So we're kind of flattening out on the trend and starting to turn back up after Labor Day, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So trend data, we've been declining for several weeks on hospitalizations, but over the last week or so, almost 2 weeks, we've flatlined at about 200 people in the hospital. And it's coming at a time around Labor Day, post-Labor Day, so that's a little concerning, right? I mean, we're seeing that in the occupancy rate as well. Overall, bed capacity is good, so only 4% occupancy rate with COVID patients, but all of the occupied beds, 7% are now occupied, or 6% are now occupied with COVID. So it's a little bit of a trend change, but not enough to be worried. It's just that we're flattened out. Case trend, same thing. We're seeing a flattening. So I would exclude the last couple of weeks because, as you know, data reporting takes a while and all those type of things. But if you look at 3-4 weeks before that, it's almost a flattened out curve. The lines flatten out. So the chart on the right is our positivity rate chart. And as you can see, it had a very nice decline all the way from July till September. But over the last 2 to 3 weeks, we're sort of bouncing around between 9 and 10%. And if you really zoom in and look at the slope of that curve, it's actually up. It's only up by like a percentage point, so we're calling it flat. But overall, so we've hit a bottom. We're not declining, and that's concerning. We should be continuing to decline. The state is declining, so something's brewing, and it's being supported by hospitalizations, and then it's also being supported by COVID-like illness. As you can see, we kept declining, and we hit a rock bottom, and now we're sort of flatlined, but the slope is a little up. So that tells me that we're seeing a slow change, not a rapid change like we saw around Memorial Day. And I credit the masks because, we've pushed it down and holiday occurred. So whatever's happened, it slowly has its impact, but we're holding steady, so to speak, with these masks. So we'll just wait and watch to see what else comes with this. I mean, I'm worried that we might see a spike. But overall, so far, we've been just kind of flatlining for the last 2 weeks.
And again, we've just seen the start of school in many locations. We've got the Labor Day holiday. I will tell you, I went out over the last couple of weekends and to some sporting type events, and unfortunately, folks there were not wearing the masks. So that was very disappointing.
I know, and I know you've done a good job, and our court members have done a good job of reminding folks. I mean, this is such an easy compromise. I mean, compared to what else we've gone through, let's just wear these, and hopefully we can keep this data pushed down.
Okay, if you want to stay in, you want to stay in.
I'll talk a little bit about school zone trends. So for the last 3 weeks or so, we saw a good trend on the schools. We had yellow school zone dashboard all across the county. I think there were only a couple of pockets that were red. What that indicated was that most of the schools in Tarrant County were ready to do a combined hybrid in-person and virtual learning. That way they would have enough room at their schools to socially distant kids, follow our safety plans that they've put together for COVID-19 and the related reopenings. Nowhere in the county we found a green pocket where they could just have a full-on in-person learning experience. But things have been changing. Last week for a little bit, our data actually indicated that there was an uptrend on the positivity rate, and we were showing that the county had turned red, but there was a lot of questions on our written guidance. What we had said was that at 10 or below, it will be in the yellow. So, some astute parents and teachers called us and said, okay, you said, and you're just at 10%, shouldn't that be yellow? So we agreed, and we looked at the trend line, and it was sort of flat. We're like, okay, so we can, agree that, and we made that change. But it was short-lived, because COVID-like illness has been sloping up, even though if you look at it from afar, it's kind of a flat line, but if you really deep dive into it, the trend has been up for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And our trend indicator has turned up. Now, COVID-like illness and positivity rate, unfortunately, are applicable at the county level. We don't have the ability to break it down to an individual school zone. It sort of loses its meaning at that small level. So the entire county's school zone map is now in the red, meaning that the recommended method is virtual learning. That doesn't mean that we change our plans right away. It just gives us caution. This just turned red, so give it a week or two to see if it continues to stay red. Then certainly, go back to virtual learning. We're probably going to see some other indicators start to change colors or go up, and that will be supportive evidence. But if you are on track to open your school, let's say this week, this just gives you caution. It doesn't stop you from doing it. It's a recommendation only. But again, it gives us caution that just don't, coast on in and thinking nothing's changed. Things are changing. A lot of our indicators are starting to flatline or turn up, and it's being reflected here in the school dashboard. Any questions on that? Okay. And then how do we continue to bend the curve? We continue to wear masks everywhere. That's the CDC guidance. We stay home as much as possible, stay 6 feet away from others, avoid large group gatherings, and follow public health guidance. So that's the end of my official presentation. But last week, 2 of you asked me some questions about some performance data. Originally, I was going to put a slide in, but then I counted and the slides were too long, so I figured I'll just give you the information. So out of the approved positions, the temporary positions, we have 148 filled, and we're making progress on filling the rest of those. And we did get the, yes, sir?
Where are they located in that building?
So there are about 75 on average that are in the Mercantile building. Okay. And then we spread out one team into the Quorum Drive building, which was already leased space that the county had. So we have some folks there. There's a facilities team there that does school investigations or nursing home investigation and so forth. And then we have a few people at our main building, because not only the EPI team, there were other people assigned from different areas that are working, so we're kind of spread out over multiple places. Idea is we don't want to put everybody together if not needed, and then we don't want to have our own outbreak, so we're trying to space them out as much as we can, and as we get full, we'll send some people home. Some are already sort of alternating, depending on the day, they might work from home and such. And then from overall number standpoint, as you can see, we have about 45,000 cases. And I know the judge asked, so how is the contact tracing going? Where are the, yes, sir?
Okay. When you first came in on the employees, you came in asking for 270.
Yes, sir.
The next week you came back and asked, I want to say 180.
Yes, sir, 186, yes, sir.
Okay. Are you at a point where you need to raise that 180?
No, sir. We're not full on our total yet. So that was round 2 of our ask. The first ask was 56. Second was approved at 186. So we have a total of 242. And we have 148 filled on our stuff, and then about 45 FTE from UNT. So we still have some room to go. Currently, the caseload is low enough that we're okay.
Okay.
If it expands, then we'll reevaluate, but I think we're okay for now. Okay. Yes, sir. So total counts, as you can see, 45,000 cases. And the judge asked about the contact tracing because in a lot of circles, there's a lot of discussion. How well is it going? You all heard me say people don't answer the call sometimes. So we did an evaluation of all the people. Around 21,000, for one reason or the other, were either not eligible to be called, or they just flat out refused, or they not answer the call. And this is not just one call; these are multiple attempts. Or they were incarcerated, or they were in a nursing home, and we were working with their facility to give them the information necessary. So that brings our eligible count to about 23,000 and some change. That's about 53% of the total. So 47 right off the bat cannot be, contacted for some reason. And I want to reassure you that we haven't left any stone unturned. We made multiple calls. Now that we have Everbridge, the electronic system, the way it works is it makes a phone call, text message, email, whatever we've got on file. It makes 3 tries before it gives up. And then as a final try, we send out a letter to their known address. We've sent 18,000 letters so far to contact 21,000 or so people that were, not being able to contact. So get that out of the way first. So out of the 53% or so that we were supposed to be working with, we worked with over 50%. So we're almost 95% complete on our work. And the pending work is just the last couple of weeks as the cases come in. We're working through those. But our contact rate has improved. I know the judge had concerns about efficiency when contact tracing is the key. During July, at the peak of 5,000 cases, and we were doing it manually, it was taking us 20, 25 days sometimes to get through the full load of calling these folks, seeing if they're going to answer, make another try, make a third try. We've got it down to less than 1 day now. On the same day pretty much, or the next morning, they get an automated call. The system generates efficiency. It gives them multiple options. It gives them the option to complete a survey online, which 3,100 surveys have been completed online since we've implemented that. It gives them the ability to call us out to our hotline and talk to a case investigator, or they can indicate that they would like for us to call them, sort of a hot lead, right? I'm willing to talk, and give me a call. So all of that is working well. Our case completion time is now about 3.5 days from start to finish, which is very, very good because it was several weeks because sometimes we just couldn't even, get through making the calls. And as far as contact attempts are concerned, we have 212,000 contact attempts made since start to finish. Now, a lot of that was the help of Everbridge, right? But before that, we were making attempts manually. And we now have another system called Sarah Alert, which monitors all the contacts as well. So we're utilizing that as well. But overall, between Sarah Alert and our manual monitoring, we've made 28,000 manual monitoring calls of people who are contacts, okay? So out of 44,000 cases, 23,000 or so we could not, 21,000 or so we could not work with. We have 23,000 to work with. We have 22,500 or so completed investigations. Out of those, we found 21,000 and some change contacts. And the reason I say that is about 15% of those contacts eventually got listed as a case. So they were moved from the contact to a case category.
So that means they went from not sure whether they were positive or not to they actually became positive.
Yes, sir. So, and there's a little breakdown in there. So, there was about 3,000 or so people when you look at that 15%. About 1,800 or so, we were monitoring them, and they eventually got the symptoms, got the test, turned into a case, and we moved them into the case count. And about 1,200 or so, we identified that they were, by the time we identified them as a contact, they had already gotten in and gotten a test because they were sick. So by the time we figured all of this out, like, oh, you're a contact of so-and-so, do you have this illness? They said, oh yeah, I went in because my friend told me and I'm now positive. So we identify them as a contact, but then eventually turn them into a case, and their circle of contacts and discussion started. So I know there's a lot of confusing numbers. What we'll do is we'll write up a report and give you all a summary, but I just wanted to kind of lay this out because a lot of this data is fluid and takes a lot to pull together. So I wanted to have a quick conversation and answer any questions, and then we'll just kind of write it up as a snapshot in time. On this date, this is what we have, and then we can update it as you all wish.
And I guess that ultimately what I want to hear you say is that, okay, here were the positives. We got a hold of the positives. We got contacts from them. We monitored them until they went through the process. And we feel like that the course of the whole deal was worth our time.
Yes, sir.
And because I really need to feel like that, okay, we found somebody positive. He gave us a list of contacts. We got a hold of those contacts, told them not to go anywhere, and that somewhere in this process we slowed the spread of this deal. And if we're not getting to them, or if it's just a matter that, okay, I think I hear you talking about 3,100 people out of approximately
about 21,000 contacts. Yes, sir.
Well, but it's 21,000, but it's really not because it's 45. I mean, there may be 23 we can't.
Yes, sir.
For some reason, I'm not sure I understand fully what some reason we can't contact them is, or they just choose not to do it. But we're spending a lot of money to get a hold of 3,100 people.
So,
or 21,000
yes,
people that ultimately come.
Yes, sir.
Let's not lose sight of the forest because we're looking at the trees.
Yes, sir.
Let's really make sure that we're spending money, not just to be spending it, but that we're actually feel like we're getting something productive out of it. And that's what I want you to go into to some extent, because otherwise we could spend that money, small business grants or rental assistance or someplace else, if we're not some way or another affecting the spread of COVID-19?
Oh, yes, sir. It definitely helps slow down the spread because, I mean, we not only were able to identify 45,000 cases, we were able to identify 21,000 people that were contacts of these cases. And out of those, we were able to identify people who eventually turned into a case. Some of them almost 1,800 on our watch while we were monitoring them. 1,200 or so by the time we got to them. As you know, there's data delays. 9 days after the test is positive, we get a result, right? And it takes a couple of days to get to this person. We're on day 10 or 11. Oh, yeah, my friend already told me I went in, got a test, I'm positive too. So that has happened. But the messaging has worked. People understand how this thing is working. They're being socially responsible. You know, when their friends and family call and say, you know, we tested positive, they already have the understanding that they need to go get a test. They might get a call from public health. Now, there are people that are just not responding. You saw that number. Out of the 21,000 or so, there were about 17,000 that just did not respond any which way. Electronic call, manual call, letter, things like that. There were about 2,000 that just flat out refused, leave me alone, I don't want to talk to you, you know. But there were people in there that were in a nursing home or in a jail setting and were working with their facility. So they were taken away from that individual, we're going to have a one-on-one conversation. So the effort is working. Is it 100% perfect? No. This is a large-scale pandemic. It's, you know, we put the best foot forward, and we try to do the rest through public education, and that's what we're doing every week.
Okay.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you.
Oh, wait.
Wait a minute. I thought that it was kind of unusual that our...
Okay, so when should we expect that written report with information that you just shared with us verbally?
So, ma'am, I have a long, almost a 10-page document that came in last night. I will try to make maybe a 1 or 2 pager for you all, and then we'll try to hopefully wrap it up this week.
Okay, very good. I will wait to review that, and it may answer my questions. I don't want to belabor the point. And then also, you mentioned that going back early in your presentation about the state positivity rate was it 6.7? And will you repeat what was ours?
Ours is now about 9.4%, I believe. We're okay. Right at 10%.
Sure. Okay, very good. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are about to get into the audience participation portion of the agenda. You might wait till the judge comes back. We have 1 or 2 that may need to be called in, but we'll wait for that discussion just a second.
Call in.
Okay. Yes, Sean,
Can I ask one question before we move to that area? I see several people around here in the room that I saw here yesterday, and I don't know whether, how many have you received paperwork from?
So what we're talking about is the JPS bond package and the program management. I have received scoring from 3 of the 5 court members at this time.
Do y'all, I think the 2 of y'all are the ones that we have not received. Do you feel like you're going to be ready to vote today or because otherwise I'm going to at least make that announcement, because a lot of people in this room might decide that they want to forego the next couple of hours.
Sure, thank you, Judge. No, I am not prepared to vote on that today.
Okay. JD, you're not?
Yeah, I'm prepared to vote on it.
Okay, well, I guess we're not going to be meeting next week, so Commissioner Allen, I really feel like we need to get this done by the end of the month. So
I totally agree.
Okay.
No, I totally agree, and I know that it's been a long time overdue, but it's a very important decision that has ramifications for decades, and so with just having had the presentations yesterday, I need some additional time to review to make sure that I'm making the right decision for our county.
Okay. Then I'll just let y'all know that are here, we will make a decision on September the 29th. So if you want to stay and endure the rest of the day, you're welcome to do that. If you would like to head out, then feel free to do that, and we will address and make our decision by September the 29th.
Thank you.
You got it.
So, Your Honor, we have one person who has actually filed two audience participation forms, one to speak on the public health report and one to speak on masks. But it's the same individual. So this would be Ms. Gunn. And I would suggest that we ask her to come forward now to speak on both issues.
Okay.
Thank you. On the health.
Please go ahead and pull the.
I actually just wanted to ask the gentleman that gives the report some questions, and she said that I needed to do it this way. So my questions are actually directed more to him about his report. I can go through you, or how would you like to handle that?
If I might suggest, if you could just simply write those questions down, that way we can research them and get you the answers.
You can ask the questions, and maybe we'll be able to do it at this point in time, but at the same time, this is a time for you to make public comment. It's not necessarily a time for us to respond or go back and forth with answers.
Okay. It might be just better to introduce the questions in the record and then let him think on it.
Yes.
And then we can address the answers at a later date. That would work. Because I was looking at our dashboard, and I see some numbers that don't make sense, but they mostly line up with what he was saying. But we have confirmed cases, we have probable cases, and we have total cases, and then we have new cases, recovered cases, and deaths. But we don't have anything that explains to us the active cases. I guess we're supposed to do the math and figure that out for ourselves, because we don't know that. It's not on the dashboard. But then it gets down and it talks about the hospitals, saying that the hospitals have 201 beds occupied with patients testing positive for COVID. Does that mean that COVID is the reason they're in the hospital, or they happen to test positive? Do they actually have symptoms of COVID? I know we have a lot of positive tests that don't mean they necessarily get sick. They could be in the hospital for other reasons and also happen to test positive for COVID. So I'd like to know how many of those patients are actually there for COVID. The other question is how many ventilators they're using right now. It says that they're using 222 ventilators. We now know that's not the best way to treat COVID. There's many other better options. They usually die once they're on the ventilator. So I'd like to know how many of those ventilators are actually COVID patients. So those are two of the things that I'd really like for him to explain. And I was going to ask him, does he know what cycle threshold they're using in the labs that they're using processing the test to get, which our labs are processing the test. What is their cycle threshold for the test? And those are questions only he could answer. So, how many active cases do we have that are actually sick?
Well, and I will say this about the active cases, and he's said it in the past before. They make what they do is they look at it and they look at a recovery. From a recovery standpoint, they may have been on there for a certain period of time. As he said, they are monitoring some, and so they'll know when they go back to work. But the others, they are making certain assumptions that after a certain period of time, they have recovered. So as far as the active cases, what I do every day is I simply take the total cases, subtract the deaths, subtract the recoveries, and in my mind, that's still the total active cases.
Well, based on what he said, because I did hear there at the end, he said it verbally, it's just not up on the screen or on the dashboard. He said something about 4,500 active cases based on.
As I calculated it as of this morning, we were right at 49. About 6,000. Well, it was about 5,000 active cases.
Okay, so I'm not sure what his number was referencing then.
Yesterday, it was 4,732 cases.
There were that many new cases yesterday?
No, there were that many what we were considering to be active. That's what I had calculated as active cases based upon the total cases, less the deaths, less the recoveries.
Okay, that's a little more like the number I had come up with. Okay, so that was all that.
And then the stuff that comes from the hospital, it comes from the hospitals. It does not come from, he just simply records that information based upon a report that hospitals report on a daily basis. Sometimes some of them don't report. Some of them just, for whatever reason, might not report over a weekend. We find a lot of times over the weekend, some of them don't report. But they report COVID, the patients that are there with COVID. They report the number of ventilators. They report the available beds. That's all information that is accumulated. He's putting it on his dashboard, but the numbers come from the regional, what they call the RAC, which I guess is the Regional Emergency Commission, or what is it?
Regional Advisory Council.
That one, the Regional Advisory Council.
So is there a way to know how many patients in the hospital beds they're counting are COVID? Are they there for COVID, or if they're there for another illness and happen to test positive? Is there a way to know that?
The hospitals report those as COVID-19 patients.
Even if they're there for a broken leg?
Well, if they've got COVID-19, they're reported there regardless of what they're there, what other reason, but...
Right, if they test positive. Not necessarily if they have symptoms, just
Correct.
if they test positive.
Correct.
Okay. You take a breath. I want to start reading fast because this part, you're going to time me. All right. Okay, I'm going to start the second one now. All right, unless you can let the two blend. All right.
They have 4 minutes, so.
So we'll be glad to let the two blend.
No, that's okay. Okay, it may seem trivial that we come to you each week while brave firefighters are fighting against all odds, rushing through flames to save 200 souls in an unbeatable situation. Hurricane victims are struggling to rebuild their lives, and more hurricanes are expected. Victims of rioters are hiding and praying God will send someone to rescue them. Every day, elderly die from loneliness and neglect, as well as this unseen virus. This last week, we remembered 9/11, a day that ended with 33 passengers on an airplane standing together to save people they didn't even know. Last week, my daughter reminded you of the American spirit. Today, I want to remind you of the Texas spirit. Texans remember William Travis, who wrote to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, "I shall never surrender or retreat. I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to American character." You need to realize this is not a trivial matter. It's not about the masks. It's about liberty, justice, and truth. You either don't know the truth or you're not willing to stand for the truth. So I'd like to bring some more truth today. The PCR test, which is used to diagnose COVID, was deemed unreliable. It uses a spin cycle to amplify the genetic material, looking for a DNA strand that can be found in human DNA. The fewer cycles, the more likely you have a positive case. The more cycles, the more likely you have a false positive. The number of cycles is called the cycle threshold. Many labs are under investigation because of over-reporting, and they do not report the number of cycles they use. The New York Times reported at the end of August that 80 to 90% of the cases generated each day should not even be included in new cases. August 25th, Collin County reported 4,600 active cases. The next day, after an audit, that number changed to 81. That is a 98% error rate. Harris County releases their new cases almost daily. A Bloomberg analysis found they included hundreds of diagnoses that were weeks or months old. I heard you talk about that today. 98 were from August, 217 from July, 274 from June, 3 from May, and they reported them all as new cases on September 9th. Out of 723, 592 were in error. Humboldt ISD discovered the cause was because the state of Texas has a backlog of millions of test results the counties are supposed to analyze when they arrive, and Harris County had not done that. Why are we reporting so many cases? Why do we have so many hot spots when Collin County has 200 active cases? In reference to the shutdown in Pennsylvania, the U.S. federal judge William Strickland ruled that even though these things were undertaken with the good intention of addressing a public health emergency, the authority of government is not unfettered. Liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms.
3 minutes.
In place when times are good.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. No, we're not doing the applause and the different things. Next is Janet Jackson, and she wishes for there to be a call.
Yes. And Your Honor, after that call, you give us three individuals that you want to call, that you want to have come to the courtroom, and we'll make sure that.
Well, it'll be Troy Paul, Amadea Tosca, and Sherrod Perry.
You be the third one.
Hello.
Ms. Jackson, this is Judge
Yes.
Whitley.
Yes.
You had called wishing to do an audience participation, so you know the routine, 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, today I would like to address, number one, I don't know why my First Amendment right was denied last week when I filled out the form, and I waited the entire time, and then I was not included in participating. I can only assume it was because I was put in the back room. So I do not appreciate that violation at all. Furthermore, I do have some questions. The introduction of a disease was declared on February 25th. That is several months ago. That does not meet the definition of an introduction of a disease today. We are 6 months into this, and therefore that is not an emergency. In fact, it is the exact opposite. This has been a slowing of death. The number of positive cases are faulty because of the high rate of the unreliability of the test. Thus far, PCR test is what has been specifically used to diagnose coronavirus. But PCR test does not specifically diagnose coronavirus at all. It only identifies a segment of RNA/DNA. That segment is replicated out depending on the lab, how many times they set the cycle threshold. If they set the cycle threshold to 40 cycles, there is a 90% false positive rate, meaning those tests are actually negative. I'd like to know how many of our 45,000 cases here in Tarrant are false positive due to this cycle threshold. Furthermore, why are we basing health policy on Vinnie Tenasia's words, goofy data? Further, our health officers, meaning specifically Vinnie Tenasia, since he is the one reporting, have a duty to provide accurate and clear information.
2 minutes.
They are breaking Texas law by not providing reputable evidence. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and Yahoo are not reliable references. Furthermore, he said our positive index rate was 9.4%, but then rounded up. In school, when I took math, you did not round up 0.4 to 10. You rounded down. Only 5 and above can be rounded up. Letters went out. I'd like to know how many of those letters were to people that said they stood in line but didn't actually get tested and received a positive letter. And so they were like, there's no way I'm contacting the Tarrant County Department of Health back. Why would I do this? I stood in line for a test. They said I tested positive for a test I never even took. Why would anybody submit themselves to further deception?
Ms. Jackson, your time is up. I will say that last week you were told that you did not submit your audience participation form in time. You knew that?
No. I was told, and I filled it out downstairs outside before I ever walked in the building, and there is proof on video of that.
Well, you did not get it up here, and we did not have that in time, and so anyway, thank you for your comments. Next is Troy Paul, followed by Amanda Tosca, followed by Sherrod Perry, followed by Doug Hines.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Troy Paul. I'm a liberty-minded conservative. I'm not an eloquent speaker, and I have no errand to speak for me, so I have to speak for myself. A couple quotes from people in the history of our nation. Wendell Phillips says, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Power is ever stealing from the many to the few. The hand entrusted with power becomes the necessary enemy of the people." And Justice George Sutherland said, "For the saddest epitaph which can be carved in memory of a vanished liberty is that it was lost because its possessors failed to stretch forth a saving hand while yet there was time." The First Amendment to the United States Constitution reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances." I've learned recently that the rules, it seems, continue to change. Who has been allowed to come in and speak, who's been allowed to be in the room in the back. And I suppose that is under your direction, Mr. Whitley, or your authority at the very least. And those are tactics of fear, intimidation, and isolation that are used to squelch political opponents. Those are actions that are tantamount to a third world dictator and not in line with American values. In 1961, Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General, he says, "Laws can embody standards, governments can enforce laws, but the final task is not a task for government. It is a task for each and every one of us. Every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom, decency, and justice."
2 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
And you still have a minute if you...
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There are many people have very strong beliefs about masks and their efficacy or not, and if they work, wear them. If they don't work, why are we wearing them? If they do work, why do I have to wear one to protect you? Is it truly the government's responsibility to protect citizens from illnesses? I don't believe so. I think the county and the state, even our federal government, has stepped way over their bounds in what their perceived authority is and what is the end game in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Armando Tosca.
Hello and good morning. I would like to remind you judges of some types of lawsuits that may give rise to a quantum lawsuit that includes 1. Knowingly presenting to the Fed government a fraudulent claim for payment. I think Vinny's claims, which he's claiming now, are inaccurate numbers, but the funds keep flowing. 2. Knowingly use a false record or statement to get a claim paid by the federal government. 3. Conspiring with others to get a fraudulent claim paid by the government. Why is it that many other counties or states have already rejected the mandate by governors and judges, and we are still standing in front of you pleading to end such nonsense? Since when is it every citizen's duty to protect everyone's health? When Abraham Lincoln was president, he celebrated his inaugural in a banquet hall called the Muslim Palace of Aladdin. Abraham Lincoln read a book called Narrative of the Loss of the American Brig Commerce, and it helped shape the way he thought. This book left a deep impression in his mind about superiority and the moral wrongs of slavery. 2 other books that helped shape his thought process was the Bible and the Pilgrim's Progress, which probably prepped him for his presidency. Lincoln's Secretary of State cautioned Lincoln that the Middle Eastern rulers, accustomed as they were to wait upon power with respect and visit weakness with disdain, would exploit the division in the U.S. to their benefit. Several of these lines I will cite from 2015, President Lincoln's Cottage, a site of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. With this being said, my guess is that the Muslims own the Dem Party and has woven oppression into the democratic laws that's created for the poor people that are filled with violence, hate, and constant sinning. And so my guess is that the mask mandate is an attempt to exploit the U.S. Oppression has been shown through the welfare system, other government agencies, including in the court system, against the poor. In addition, I would like to add to my idea last week about the hand railings. Trinity Trails also adding a train ride, a playground, and a zoo would be beneficiary to the county's uprising. I got hit by a car in Vanzone Park in Paramus, New Jersey, where the officers were my hero and performed CPR on me.
3 minutes.
They have acres upon acres filled with trails, playgrounds, pony rides, and zoo and train rides. Building is a better way to create revenue.
Thank you, Ms. Tosca. Sharon Perry.
All right. Good afternoon to you all. Okay. So I asked outside if I could have a sort of a conversation. Like, I have a few points I wanted to share, but also just ask you all some questions as well. All right. Just if you have some answers for me, that'd be terrific. So one thing I will say, I will commend the question that you asked earlier to Dr. Tanasia about the cases, about the case count, because that's among other things, that is a key question. Is a case, is that per test or is that per person? Because it should be per person, as we know. But I'm hearing as well that in many cases it's actually per test. So obviously a person takes it many times, and there's one person can be several cases, which shouldn't be the case. No pun intended. So. All right, but like I said, and I was going to, this is an article that just confirms that, as it says here, Texas officials, they said that, back in August there was a spike in cases, and it was due to coding errors, and, they said system upgrades. So, there's a lot of questionable things going on with cases. But again, cases to me is a misleading statistic.
And I'm actually wearing my shirt from working at Tarrant County College. As I might have told you before, I think I did that. I've taught math and statistics at Tarrant County College for the past 10 years. So that's what I've been looking at heavily for the past 6 months. And again, cases is misleading because, as we all know, the more you test, the more cases you get. So if you wanted the easiest way to get the cases down to zero would be to stop testing, right? Zero test would be zero cases. So I don't think we're talking about stopping the testing. So I agree that the positivity rate, the rate of positivity, that to me is a key statistic. And I looked at it this morning, and it just along with Dr. Nate, along with what he was saying, it's around 9%.
2 minutes.
Okay, around 9 and 10%. So one of my questions was, it is about end game. What are the metrics that we are targeting? Like when can we say that it's over in Tarrant County? You can take the mask off. We can end the social distancing. And I wanted to show you one chart from Sweden. You might have heard about, a lot of people talking about the situation there, because they never mandated masks. They never enforced any mandates whatsoever. They just offered them as guidelines as you should do this, but we're not going to force you. And this chart right here shows you Sweden's case curve. And what I've circled here is the past month or so. So in the past month, their daily deaths have been in the single digits, and then they've had a lot of days with 0 deaths. I mean, you could say in Sweden that the pandemic is over, and they never had to institute mandates for masks. So there are other countries where you can also make that case. So anyway, that was my question. What metric are we targeting?
I guess your time is up. What I'm going to say is the same thing I said last week. Is that when I begin to look at when the mask order may be struck down or pulled back or canceled, will be after consultation with folks in the medical profession, public health, in the hospitals, businesses, and I will take advice and listen to their comments. And at that point in time, we'll talk with my colleagues here at the court, and at that point in time, we'll make the decision. There is not a definite number or anything along that lines that, in my mind, right now, I see as the target that would say, okay, once we hit this case, boom, it's over.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. And who are these officials? Can you name a few names as far as officials?
I've said before that I talked with a number of the physicians in this area. I've talked with presidents of the medical societies for Collin, Denton, Dallas, and Tarrant County. I've talked with our public health folks. I've talked with my colleagues on the court. We have a call once a week with school superintendents, school board members, city managers, and mayors. And so I talk with all of those folks. And so it's after conversations with those folks and looking, and again, from my perspective, the next 4 weeks are very important because it will have gotten us past the Labor Day as well as the start of school. And those are going to be very important days as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So thank you for your comments and
Thank you for discussing with me. So, all right.
Doug Hines, followed by Robert Baker, followed by Blanca Martinez.
Judge Whitley, Commissioners, thanks for having us back and giving us the opportunity to speak again. I've got a simple answer for Sherrod's question, and that is with respect to the question of what is the deal with COVID. I'm here to tell you COVID is over in every meaningful respect here in Tarrant County, and the only thing that is going on right now is the continued misinformation, lies, and obfuscation and collateral damage. That's what's going on right now. Let's look at the data here, what we heard about this morning. Number one, for the week ending September 12th, last Saturday, there's 256 newly reported confirmed cases of COVID in Tarrant County. That is, comparatively, when you look back, is a lower number than the first 2 weeks of March when they first started counting these things. So in the last 6 months, we're back to where we started off 6 months ago. It's on a complete downhill slide right now. That's where we're at. The epidemic curve has fallen off a cliff. Since the high point 2 months ago on July 11th, the week ending July 11th, where there was 5,543 confirmed cases that week, we're now down to 653 confirmed cases, an 88% reduction since July. That is a cliff all which we have fallen off with respect to this alleged disease. Number three, the doubling time for COVID is now flat. It's flat, i.e. we have flattened the curve. The curve is flattened. Let's declare victory here. We have flattened the curve. Wasn't that the original thing we were all talking about back in March when all this stuff happened, when he took away our liberties, took away our freedom? I say it is. I say it was, and it still is. That's the fact of the matter. Well, let's look at the lies that are continuing with. Here's the lies and misinformation. Masks are effective in the transmission and contraction of the disease. Negative. They are not effective for either. There's myriad of studies out there saying masks are ineffective. And again, what some of the other folks have said here, if it's so effective, why do I have to wear one? Protect yourself if you like. I protect myself with God and freedom. Also, business lockdowns are effective for stopping the spread of COVID. Negative. We just heard statistics from Sweden. I'm here to give you statistics comparatively, Tarrant County to South Dakota. South Dakota's has an 884,000 person population, but they have a 1.9% per capita rate of infection of confirmed cases of COVID in that state, where ours is 2.1%, statistically insignificant difference. They have in South Dakota a 0.021% death rate. Ours is right as of now, at the 608 deaths, ours is at 0.03. Again, a little bit statistically insignificant difference there. That's a state that did no lockdowns, did no mask mandate, and didn't mess up their whole economy and take away the liberty, freedoms, and enjoyment of citizens of that state. So I'm here to tell you, based on that, that's not good. Collateral damage. Look at the collateral. Those are the lies. Look at the collateral damage that's still in effect. This is definitely still in effect. We're still got a tremendous crushing of liberty and freedom here in Tarrant County. We have a tremendous loss of business and individual livelihoods of working people in this country.
Thank you,
and we've
Mr.
got to
Hines.
stop. Thank you.
Robert Baker. Maybe it's Bucher.
I'm going to read from the Texas Health and Safety Code. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that's not aware of this here in this courtroom. Texas Health and Safety Code 81-082, Administration and Controls of Measure. A declaration of public health disaster may continue for no more than 30 days. Public health disaster may be renewed one time by the Commissioner for additional 30 days. 5 months later, here we are. And I have that right here pulled off of the Texas Public Law and Statutes, and it's current, and it's not been ratified, modified, or amended. Let's see. Look at my paper here. Colleyville has pretty much done a good job of not worrying about the mask mandate. Idaho just followed in Nebraska, Bandera County in Texas, along with Montgomery County. So this is supposed to be the land of the free, but I just read you a violation of the Health and Safety Code. But here we are, still with the mask mandate. Not sure why we're still here with the mask mandate when that alone just dismantled the whole thing. Just like with the vaccines, we have the freedom to not take it or take it. Just the same way with the mask. If it works for you, wear it. I have no problem with it. If it doesn't work for me, that's good too. Should be our individual rights between us and our providers. They should be the ones to say, hey, it's probably in your best interest to wear it, and we should take that advice and that advice only. $4,727 as of 14 hours ago is what the active cases in the county are. Pretty low. 4% is with the bed rising in Tarrant County as far as what's going on with the hospitals. They're at 4% capacity. 4% capacity. I don't know if you heard it in the back there. That doctor, I guess you can call him that. Not sure what he is at this point. And yesterday.
2 minutes.
Yesterday, the Fort Worth Telegram just reported we had no deaths in 2 weeks. Since the last 2 weeks is the last one, we've had no deaths.
That's not correct.
Fort Worth Telegram, I will give them a call then.
Go right ahead. You can call them.
Fort Worth Telegrams, Tunnel Live. Imagine that. So with sports opening and everything, and we still got the mask mandate, you got kids touching and rubbing on each other, and now we got some cases in Keller. We got cases here and there. We should have, I mean, if we're going to really commit to this, it should have been no sports, period, from the Cowboys down to the local levels. I know the kids got to have something to do, but like I said, the health matters. I work around a lot of police officers that come in day out, and even they're tired of it. They're sick of it. But my question for that is, and this is what blows my mind, we have a certified police sergeant that reads the narratives, for the make sure it matches the case and all that. While these officers are back around their case, not one of them wears a mask in a building with no filtration.
3 minutes.
I'm just saying, I'll start holding them accountable if we're going to commit.
Blanca Martinez.
Thank you, Judge Whitley and Commissioners, for having us today and for listening to us. And I pray to God that your ears are open and that God can give you divine wisdom and understanding. Because I look around this court today and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Is this America? Is this America where they're making you put on a mask that, medically speaking, has been proven to increase upper respiratory infections, carbon dioxide poisoning, brain damage? Come on. They are making us wait. Not me. I refuse to comply. Refuse to comply. Because not only is it unconstitutional, it is medically unsafe to make our public wear a mask. And the next step is the vaccine. Didn't you watch the news on Sunday morning? What did they show? That in spite of the negative responses of some of the participants in the vaccination trials, they were going to continue these trials. They were going to continue to mandatorily vaccinate is the next step for our people, for our city of Fort Worth, Dallas, and the United States of America, the same country that our forefathers gave their lives for. They bled and died so we can have freedom, not for anyone to overreach, overstretch their authority and say, no, you must wear a mask. I refuse to comply. I refuse to take a vaccination, which is the next step. And I refuse to listen to the lies of this Dr. Vinny Tenacia.
You will face forward.
Sir.
We've already had complaints about the people around you when you start screaming like this. So if you're going to speak,
yes, sir,
you'll speak in a civil manner.
Yes, sir.
And you'll speak facing me.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that understood?
Yes, sir. And that's another thing. We're treated like children. We're treated disrespectfully. You expect that the public is not in an outrage over this? Anyone with a mind to have a master's degree? I graduated cum laude. I am a professional social worker by profession, and yes, I am upset. I am upset that I look around and this is no longer the United Free States of America. That hydroxychloroquine and betazidine work, and they are censoring our doctors right here in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Lozano, Dr. Bartlett, and other great physicians are being censored and banned and not allowed to say the truth about the cure for this COVID, which is a bioterrorist attack. But I have the freedom to choose. I have the freedom to wear a mask if I want to or not want to. And I have the freedom to say enough is enough. And that's what I'm saying today. Enough is enough. We want our freedom back. Thank you. God bless you.
Ms. Martinez. Jody, followed by Christy, that looks like Cummings, followed by Francisco Latimer.
I just want to read a quote from someone that talked today. He said, "Sometimes you just do things because it's the right thing to do." Well, the right thing to do is not to say that these masks are just a compromise. I've lost my job because of this mask order, and this is proof from Unum, insurance company for Bass Pro. That's one of my jobs I lost. Now I have ADA accommodations. That wasn't good enough. They wanted a doctor's note. They wanted all my medical records. That's a violation of HIPAA, and I can't even go to the doctor because they want me to wear a mask. I tried to get into one doctor. They forced a mask on me, and I started vomiting and ended up in the ER. So I want to know who's going to pay for that since I have no job. I'm here to talk, and hopefully this gal behind me doesn't roll her eyes and put her hands out like she did with the last gal. A friend of mine informed me that children in school near her are being forced to now decorate masks and told they're good and normal. This sounds more like grooming than an education. This is very disturbing and seems to be the precursor for what you all have in store for us, which is the next phase: forced vaccinations with a hydrogel ingredient, more 5G deployment, which will harm us, controlling the masses, and microchipping, to name a few. Will those also be marketed to children and adults as normal? Many of us know the public school system is one-sided with their liberal curriculum, but this is beyond the pale with propaganda and lies told to innocent children. This further causes confusion for children with parents that are very much awake and know better. I sincerely hope parents forcing their children into that indoctrination setting are teaching them to stand up against the lies and to speak out against it. What these teachers are doing to children is inciting propaganda and fear-mongering, and is ultimately causing toxic stress to that child. Teachers should not be promoting submission devices as normal when it is actually the opposite, causing harm mentally and physically, not to mention violation of rights and not a law, and definitely not a compromise. Many teachers are aware of the ACE study, so there is no excuse for them to perpetrate more trauma onto a child. If this court and panel believes in everything the CDC puts out, then I'm asking you, the entire panel, to start researching what the ACE study is. It's the largest investigation of childhood abuse, neglect, household challenges, and later life health and well-being predictors caused by toxic stress. Abuse and neglect is not just regarding parents, but can also include clergy, coaches, or teachers. Children are in school for socialization and education, not for more stress. These unlawful shutdowns and mask orders have also put many families into poverty, causing other harmful effects to a child, with some parents turning to alcohol or causing violence in the home due to stress, which raises their ACE scores of each child and results in mental and physical health issues that follow them into adulthood if they live to tell about it. I'm asking all of you if you would please go look for Nadine Burke-Harris, an actual doctor, on YouTube, and her TED Talk, Nadine Burke-Harris and Dr. Rashid Buttar. And not just listen to one-sided rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Cummings.
Good morning, Judge. I have high anxiety, so please bear with me. Okay, in less than 4 months, our government successfully instilled fear in a majority of the population in America that allows them to control every aspect of your life, including what you eat, where you go, who you see, and your toilet paper. And the most dangerous and terrifying part, people are not afraid of the government who remove their freedoms. They are afraid of their neighbors, family, and friends, and they hate and mock those who will comply. It is absolutely terrifying to me that so many people don't question authority. They are willing to surrender their critical thinking skills and independence. They just give up without thinking, without a fight. Do you know what's coming next? It's just a vaccine. Come on, it's for the greater good. Wait until you're told that you can't enter any store or business without proof of a COVID-19 vaccine. Wait until you can't go to public events or get on a plane without proof of receiving the vaccine. To everyone who doesn't believe this is possible, do you understand that the government successfully dictated to people when they were allowed to be outside where they were allowed to go and how their children would be educated in less than 4 months, and that a majority of the population followed blindly because they were told to do so. You're kidding yourself if you think this behavior won't be repeated with a vaccine or whatever the next step is. They got you without a thought, without a fight, just like France, just like Russia, just like China. Judge, please reconsider the mask mandate and consider the Constitution. The Almighty God gave us an immune system for a reason. Why are we bowing down to the government? Let's bow down to the Lord instead. He is faithful.
2 minutes.
He doesn't want us to have a spirit of fear. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Thank you. God bless you, Judge.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Francisco Latimer. Followed by Tam. Well, no, we've already got Tammy Gunn, so we did both of those earlier. And I do have one more after that. That's Judith Shelton. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Judge. I'm a high school student with a learning disability, and I would like to take a few moments to advocate for myself and others like me who are struggling with the virtual schooling that has been forced upon many students. Students with disabilities, students who receive 504 accommodations, and others have a very difficult time with the virtual schooling that is being offered. As we do not get the one-on-one in-person face time with our teachers in order to facilitate learning with our special situations. Not all students are the same, and I feel that this group of students have been ignored and neglected by both the schooling system and government with the imposition of virtual school. Virtual schooling is unwelcoming, makes participation difficult, and ultimately affects the motivation and morale of special needs students who thrive on in-person targeted learning. I would also add that upon our eventual return to school, mask requirements for this group of students have also not been thought of. Special needs students have a difficult time with masks, as some disabilities make masks more of a distraction than they would be for others, and can have a detrimental effect on learning, attention, and concentration. I urge you, on behalf of many special needs students in this county and in the state, fully reopen our schools and do so in an inclusive manner that takes the needs of all students into account. Just yesterday, County of Butler, plaintiff versus Thomas W. Wolf, defendant. Federal judge rules Pennsylvania COVID restrictions are unconstitutional. Violates First Amendment right of assembly. Violates due process clause of 14th Amendment. Violates equal protection clause of 14th Amendment. United States District Judge William Stickman wrote, "The response to a pandemic or emergency cannot be permitted to undermine the system of checks and balances here. Defendants are statutorily permitted to act with little, if any, meaningful input from the legislator. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigations measures." Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Latimer. Judith Shelton.
Good morning. Before I start, I want to answer your question that you did to the doctor. And because my husband had COVID and he was tested twice, and the Texas Department of Health called him twice because he had 2 files open for his case, the 2 tests he took. So sometimes they are counting these tests double, triple, several times. So I just wanted you to know, because I had the answer. We talked with the Texas Department of Health. They call us. So I'm going to read this. During last week's hearing, it was said that the only power the judge has relates to the mask mandate. If this is the case, why has the mandate been made ignoring important pieces of the governor's order regarding mask use? Governor Abbott's order explicitly states that masks are to be worn in spaces where it is not feasible to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. Why are we being forced to wear masks when 6 feet of distance is attainable? In this very room, we are seated roughly 6 feet apart, yet we are threatened by law enforcement if we so much as lower our mask for one breath of fresh air, or even to clear our glasses from fog. You have officers of this court who will not even let public into the building so that they may speak their piece with you without intimidation tactics and threats. Most places have ample space for 6 feet of distance to be maintained, this chamber included. So why intimidate and scare the public into compliance with this heavy-handed mandate? Another point of the governor's order that is being ignored is the explicit exemption given that the requirement does not apply to any person with a medical condition or disability that prevents wearing a face covering. Why are you only mandating bits and pieces of the order? Why are medical conditions suddenly thrown out of the window when we have fought so hard to provide accommodations for people with medical or other disabilities in almost every aspect of public life? Medical conditions other than coronavirus have existed before this so-called pandemic and will exist after. Why are we ignoring these individuals? Why are we fixated on only one medical problem when we could be causing so many more with the solution? I have only recently started to speak my mind on these orders, but I have met people that have constantly been coming to this court on a weekly basis, sometimes being allowed to speak, sometimes protesting outside, but always resisting the ridiculous mask mandates whenever possible. Why have none caught this highly contagious disease? Why have none gotten sick when we are led to believe we need a mask in any and all situations to be safe? Are we really at the level of risk that the government, national or local, says we are? Or are we just pawns in a large game of politics and power? Thank you.
Ms. Shelton. That concludes our comments, audience participation requests for today. We'll move on with the administrator's report. I will just, Ms. Shelton, say that the only order that we currently have in place in Tarrant County is the mask order. If you look around this room, there are many instances where we're not able to be 6 feet apart. The same is true with regards to other locations. My order only deals with businesses, would be inside of those businesses. It says that their employees and any customers are to wear masks when they're inside of those businesses. The order for the individuals outside is the governor's order, and that's the one that he still has that order, as well as many orders affecting the number of folks who can be inside. And so from that perspective, that's what we've looked at in here. We have a policy as a county that within our buildings that you will wear a mask unless for health issues you cannot. And we require that if you're saying that that is the reason you cannot wear a mask, then we basically have indicated that you must have something from a physician saying that for health reasons, do not have to delineate or describe what those reasons are, but if you have that, then you can come into the building without wearing the mask, conduct your business, and then leave. But if you don't have that, then regardless of where you are in the building, except when you're speaking, you're supposed to be in a mask. And that's something that we probably need to take a little bit more seriously, because I do believe that certain people feel like this back room is for just, you don't have to wear a mask if you're in the back room. The only ones that are exempted from wearing a mask inside of a county building are those folks that for health reasons, with the evidence by a doctor saying that there are health reasons why the mask shouldn't be worn. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, if we can go to the administrator section. The first item, we do not have any information relating to any new declarations of local disasters by the governor. So we'll now move to item number 2. And we're going to have various reports at this time from the City of Guidehouse is on the line. Katie, are you there?
Yes, DK, I am here.
Okay, if you'll go ahead and start.
Okay, good afternoon, Judge and Commissioners. So like every week, we're going to start with a quick project status update. So all activities are on track. Before I jump into any of the key activities here, I want to highlight a big milestone that the county achieved yesterday. They submitted their first FEMA PA project worksheet, which totaled $5.9 million. So great job to everybody who was involved in that. I know it was a lot of work. So we're going to be continuing to work with the county on FEMA PA, and we'll also be initiating work soon on the second project worksheet. We had our second ILA municipality office hours last week, where we focused on the payroll guidance from the Treasury, and Rachel's going to provide you some highlights on that in a few slides. We've also sent out our week 3 ILA newsletter, and we're working closely with Russell and the team on the webinar for this week's office hours, which will focus on payroll documentation requirements. Last week, we finalized the payroll guidance, and it's being sent to the municipalities today. We also provided some interpretive guidance to the counties to reference for their own use. We completed an initial CRF funding analysis, which we'll be discussing later on in this presentation as well. Last week, we had our transition meeting for the county expenditures report. Due to this transition, our presentation does not include the detailed expenditures update this week. However, we will resume that update on September 29th and each week going forward. So today's discussion, we're going to focus on the updates for the county's pillars, a summary of our CRF funding analysis, highlights from our webinar and guidance that we've provided, and then we'll wrap up with an update on the grant opportunities. Does anybody have any questions on our project status? If not, we can move on to the next slide. So similar to previous weeks, I'm just going to touch on the pillars with updates, and then the administrator's office will be providing a more detailed update on the individual programs after our presentation. So under social services, NGO program is continuing to present funding recommendations on a continuous basis. And under the local partner pillars, the eligibility review for the ILAs is still ongoing. Supplemental guidance has been provided and also not shown here, but the county developed and will be distributing the ILA reporting template today. Any questions on the 4 pillars? If not, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so before I jump into the detail here, I want to kind of set the stage for you guys. The numbers shown here are from the September 3rd expenditures report, which we presented to court last week. We're going to be updating this analysis going forward, but I do want to let you guys know the following chart is it's a very conservative view of where the county stands with CRF expenditures and the CRF remaining. The expenditures shown do not include the FEMA PA PW submitted yesterday or the other FEMA PA eligible expenditures at this point, to ensure that we have that cushion to accommodate any fluctuations in the actual reimbursements received from FEMA. So just to start out, the first column you'll see here is the CRF spend category. This includes the 4 pillars, the county operations, and then we have an unallocated bucket, which is just the difference between 4 pillars, county operations, and the $209.8 million received. And then in the first column, it has all of your allocated amounts or unallocated in reference to the unallocated CRF. And then in the third column, you'll see the actual expenditures. I do want to call out that we haven't pulled out the testing expenditures for this analysis because we are still working with the county to identify what is officially testing related expenditures at this point. So that expenditure number is included in the $28.4 million under county operations right now, and we will be breaking that out in the future. And then finally, in the last column, you'll see our CRF remaining. You can quickly identify the CRF remaining in each spend category, which is going to help us understand the progress of all of the county programs and to let us know how we need to plan for the future. And at the bottom, you'll see the circled in green is 104.5. Again, this is a conservative number for what amount of CRF is remaining at this point, but that does give us a good base so we can move forward and kind of work with the county on talking through program development or just making sure the county is utilizing all of the funding that's provided. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the information on this slide?
And Rachel, these numbers
okay.
These numbers are going to change even with today's activities because our spend has increased. What is the date of the expenditures on this chart?
They are September 3rd, so they are a little behind. So we will be updating this chart regularly. We're going to be continuing this analysis on a go-forward basis just to make sure that we are planning appropriately for the funding received and making sure that we're not leaving anything on the table here.
Thank you.
I think economic stimulus is, I was told earlier today that it's over 16 million.
Right. We have a significant jump in the economic small business assistance program.
Okay, so are there any other questions on this slide? Or if not, I can pass it over to Rachel and she will take it from here.
Thanks, Katie. So we can move to the next slide, webinars and guidance interpretation resources. So here we just wanted to provide a bit more context for how Guidehouse and the county are working together to interpret Treasury and Treasury OIG guidance and to create tools and resources for the county and its subrecipients. So this slide provides 2 examples of flowcharts that we developed with the county to help municipalities that received CRF funds from the county to identify and calculate their eligible payroll expenses. And I won't go through them in depth, but these materials were used in the recent webinar and office hours that we are now holding weekly for municipalities held by Guidehouse in the county. So we have one coming up tomorrow as well. That's going to do more of a deep dive webinar into documentation for these payroll costs. We just wanted to give a sense of what some of these resources look like so you have an idea of some of the stuff that we're working on and some of the materials that are available to the municipalities that have received funds from the county. Any questions on this slide before I move on?
They just keep changing things, don't they?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
They keep changing things, don't they?
They sure do. This is the most recent one that includes what we were waiting for on the payroll was Treasury's most recent and kind of more detailed guidance on their definition of substantially dedicated and substantially different. So those two terms are really important in identifying which employees are eligible to have their payroll expenses covered by CRF and which are not, as well as what proportion of those payroll expenses can be covered. So now that we got that information, I think about a week or two ago, we were able to put together these flow charts that have walked through with those current definitions and also with the county's, our interpretation and the county's interpretation to walk folks through this process to help identify what those are.
I've got a question, and I know Guidehouse does a lot of work for a lot of different entities. Has there been any discussion, dialogue on the possibility of extending the expiration date for finishing the spending of the dollars at the end of December? Has there been any conversations to extend that?
There's been some conversation. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say the exact same thing you were. There have been conversations. We do have some connections with the Treasury, so we are trying to stay on the ground floor of that. And I know it has come up multiple times. We've kind of been keeping an ear out too and making sure we're watching all of the releases, but it has come up a couple times, and we do think there is a likelihood that that will happen.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner, one of the things that we're doing, we're reaching out to our representatives in D.C. and strongly encouraging them to extend the December 30th date.
Okay.
And something else to keep in mind for that is that the current reporting system is structured, their online grants portal is set up to be receiving reports through 2021. So if there is an extension, it would be a pretty seamless transition in terms of the county's reporting, which we know is a big burden for the county to get together every quarter. Any other questions on this slide before I move on? If not, we can wrap up with the grants opportunities. And so this final slide is just, of course, as Katie mentioned, we don't have our typical detailed expenditure slide today, but we do have the most current grant opportunities. There has not been any new awards since last week. So in total, we are still at about $229 million in grant funds. And this list, as you can see, includes a number of the restricted grants that Katie did not that were not included on the previous slide, but only touched on the CRF pillars. Any questions on this slide? If not, that wraps up our presentation for today.
Okay, and if we could, we'd like to go with just some more detailed numbers as far as the four pillars. And I might ask that when we get to the item dealing with the revised rental assistance program, Ms. Ward, you might want to talk to the court about the notification from HUD this past week. Okay. So as Commissioner Fick has said, we did see an increase in the small business assistance program. You will be asked to approve $1.8 million more. I believe that approval then will go directly to auditor, and she will go ahead and distribute those funds. Ms. Tidwell has distributed with this addition $16.1 million of that particular program. We're going to go through a few announcements, and I'm going to ask Ms. Tidwell to come up and talk a little bit about the program one more time. On the rental assistance, you can see by the numbers that our rental assistance program is increasing. We're working internally and externally to make sure that we get the word out that we're going to be doing some additional public statements, so that in working with the apartment and complex group and with the JPs and what Mr. Schaffner talked about earlier today, so that we can expand that program and make it as successful as we possibly can. On the non-governmental assistance program, I'm not going to go into that. I'll ask Ms. Camareno to discuss that whenever she makes her presentation after this piece in the agenda. And then finally, on the chamber participation, we remain at 10 chambers at 43,000. I'd like to give you some numbers that deal with testing. Over this past week in the Arlington area, our Arlington site, we had 373 tests. The NRH2O program, we had 1,066 tests. That is out of a 4-day cycle, Labor Day, and 2 days after Labor Day, they had closed early. Tarrant County College area, Commissioner Brooks, that's a 3-day test site, and we tested 241 in last week. So our numbers are still looking really good. The NRH2O site is our most active site. That is the one that TDM is helping us with, and we're encouraging and working with TDM to make sure that site continues to perform. One other thing that we'd like to just mention, and it really deals with the NGO applications for rental assistance. Besides the rental assistance program that's being run through community development, we have received requests from numerous entities to supplement their rental assistance program. These 2, 4, 6, 7 entities have requested a total of about $984,000. We're going to be working with them to make sure that any of their requests and the expenditures that they've incurred meet the guidelines of our COVID rental program. And then we will be coming back to you for approval to disperse some additional funds as it relates to those 7 entities. And we may pick up some more also. But I think it goes to point out that besides what Tarrant County is doing, what the City of Fort Worth is doing as far as rental assistance, that there are a lot of programs out there that are providing rental assistance. And we are now just seeing a request for some reimbursements on there. So we work with our partners to ensure that anyone that makes a request for rental assistance, that we can handle that request either through COVID-related monies, for HUD-related monies, or volunteer monies, or just nonprofit monies. So with that, I'll ask Ms. Tidwell if you'd like to come forward and talk a little bit about the small business program.
So I have one item to discuss with you this morning, and that's related to people who were deemed to be ineligible. We're getting a lot of requests to share the particular reason why we deemed a business not eligible. So I'm going to give you some statistics. We have 553 total currently that have been deemed ineligible. Now, previously, back in the very beginning, anyone that we verified to be in the City of Fort Worth, those were also deemed ineligible and they were removed. So these are not that big group. Of these 553, 350 of them are businesses per our review that did not suffer a loss. They had more income in April and May than they had previously. Okay? With that said, we don't feel that we certainly are not qualified to be the appellate because we're the ones who've made the decision. But we are going back through each and every application that we've deemed ineligible and have a third-party review or a third review in my office. When we are finished with that, which there's not that many of them left, if the court were to wish to establish an appeals process, I'm making you aware that it's that time, we are not going to share with a business why we deem them ineligible because that simply generates a lot of dialogue. So if the county wishes to have an appeals process or a formal process for explaining to a business why they were not considered, I'll leave that to your discretion. We considered that the majority of the businesses were not, based on the information they provided, we do not believe they suffered a loss. And then we have about about 91 that were still looking for required documents. We had a group of folks who never actually finished their applications. We had a group of folks that applied twice. We had some that were clearly not eligible because of the type of business that y'all included in your original criteria. So we're down to the 553. When we finish the third review, we will send out or propose to send out simply an email that tells the business that they were not eligible. So I'm just sharing information. We're almost to the end of the program and are going to be finished with our work related to round one.
Let me understand. You said you're not going to tell these people why they're ineligible.
No, sir.
So they're going to call me.
Well,
okay, and they're going to want to know why.
Well, they're going to call me and ask me, and we're sharing that information as appropriate. But
well, they may call you, but they're already calling me.
Right.
Okay.
So you might want to consider whether you want an appeals process, how you want to officially handle notifying employees or businesses, and what you want to tell them. My only comment on that is, and I know people want to understand, but if you've ever tried to talk to an employee, for instance, that you were letting go, no matter what you told them, they're going to argue. And
that's
again,
what they're going to do to us.
Right, which is why I'm offering that you could set up an appeals process. That's within y'all's.
Okay, so let me understand the appeals process. The appeals, we set up an appeals process, and they decide we feel like this person needs to be funded, and your people have already decided that you don't feel like they need to be funded. Are you going to approve the funding?
If you provide the documentation that determines what your appeal was based on, certainly, sir. The court approves them.
Let me give you just a quick example. Let's say you have a restaurant and COVID hit, and you know they did the tough thing, maybe not the right thing, but they did the tough thing, and they had to let a lot of people go. Okay, they had to cut back on every and any expense they could. Well, at the end of 3 months, they actually made a little profit. Okay, they're not eligible for anything, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that the criteria was that they had to have been impacted by COVID, i.e. that box B was greater than box A. In other words, that their costs, their revenues, their costs were greater, or their net profit was greater in January and February and March than it was in April and May. That's the criteria that was established for the program, sir. So when we evaluated it based strictly on numbers and on documents that they provided, we've made our best estimate. We've done everything we can to be fair. But in your example, in theory, if they made more money in April and May than they made January, February, and March, the criteria says they're not eligible, regardless of how they did that. Again, that's where you, as the decision makers, those were the parameters that we operated under. If you want to consider something different, then we've already processed almost 2,000 applications, though, using that criteria. And 2,000 businesses were eligible using the criteria that they had to have had more revenue in the previous 3 months than in the last 2.
So out of the total, you got 2,000 that you actually are going to send money to.
2,000 that we are sending money to, yes, sir.
Okay.
I believe it's
You got
1993 today that
Did
we've
you say
sent checks
300,
to.
350 who were Fort Worth-based businesses?
No, sir, I said those were already all eliminated previously. Of this 553 that's left, there's 353 of them that we do not believe that they suffered a loss.
353.
Yes, sir.
But you had another 350 that were Fort Worth-based.
Yes.
Okay, so
Some number, I'm not sure, I didn't bring that
so
number
they
today.
probably shouldn't have even applied.
They were not, should not have been included, yes, sir.
Okay, so then where's the other 200? Because you
So
get
the
to
other 200
500.
here is, there were 41 people that submitted more than one application. Okay? We had 92, again, that I would say that per the very specific criteria that we had to operate under were ineligible. The type of business that they were did not qualify.
Yeah.
We had 13 that we still lack required documents to process. We had 24 that we couldn't ever substantiate that they were actually in business. We reached out to these people. We found another 8 that were in Fort Worth, even though they had said they were somewhere else. We found another 22 that were somewhere but not in Tarrant County. And I'd be happy to provide you these statistics. I'll send you an email and you can have my list.
Could I make just a suggestion?
Certainly, sir.
Instead of telling these people nothing, which I think is not the right thing to do, you might think about saying we had a very large number of applicants who had, higher revenues over expenses or something to that effect. And they can very simply look at their own application and tell if that's the case.
And I understand what you're saying, but in the example that you just gave me about the business that let their employees go and they waited the tables and cooked themselves in that example, I'm not sure those people are going to see what you're describing without still having to have a conversation with someone.
Renee, the biggest problem we've had on this thing is, one, we haven't been communicating with so many of these people. They haven't heard something, and they're wondering what's going on. And they call, and I'm getting calls, and I call, I think I've talked to you, I've talked
So I will provide,
Lisa,
I'm more than willing to provide a list of the businesses and why they were denied. I don't have the resources, nor do I feel that I can be the one that has that discussion with them, because basically I think they're going to want an appeals process. They're going to want to discuss why they were not awarded the money.
Well, we're fixed to go out for another round. What we're doing is we're setting them up to do the same darn thing again. Okay? We need to give these people some guidance. And if it inconveniences you, I'm sorry.
It's not about inconveniencing me, sir. It's about me having the resources to do this, and we've reached out to these people.
We've given you the authority to hire a very large number of people.
Well, when I get those people on board, and with the DA's, let me finish.
We did this 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
And we've let them go. We no longer have them. And I also would like the DA to make certain that they tell me that I'm doing what's in the best interest of Tarrant County, and that how I respond, how I state what we can.
Well, I just don't want to set this whole thing. This thing's been kind of a disaster, okay, in my opinion. The way it's gone and the time it's taken. And I don't want to see us repeat it. I'm trying to help us make some changes. But why are we going to set them up to make the same darn mistake again? That's silly.
I've expressed my concern, sir. And I will consider whatever you want to offer. But we've processed these under the criteria that the court approved. We've done the best we could with the resources that we had. We've completed the program. We've sent out almost $17 million to almost 2,000 businesses. And I have 553 left that the majority of those people didn't qualify. We could certainly put into the communication whatever the court and the district attorney believes to be in the best interest of the county. That's not my decision.
I think we need to explain something to them.
Okay,
if it's
then
in
I'll
an
ask
email,
the DA. I'll
whatever.
ask the DA to assist us.
That's
with
all
that.
I'm getting at.
And go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead.
Renee, I did want to ask, Renee.
Yes.
I would like a copy of that list, of the breakdown of the numbers that you shared. I do share the concern about the type of feedback or feedback that we can give folks so that they know what our concerns were, especially if that could help them in the future. I'm curious because I know that we use Williamson County's program to guide some of our decisions. Did they have a formal appeal process, or what did they do with their businesses that did not meet their program's criteria?
We actually wound up more or less modeling it after Denton County, I believe. Lisa can speak to that, and I'm not sure, Lisa, you want to share that?
I'm not aware of an appeals process, and we really strayed a lot from Williamson County, so I can't say that we used their program. We started that way, but we went further.
Denton County.
I did want to address, though, Commissioner Fickus's concerns about one-on-one communication. When we get applicants who are questioning where the status of their application is, they are responding to our TCSB grant email box. And Megan and I are communicating individually with each of those. And we have been doing that and trying to keep them updated over this 2-month period. And now we're getting down to people that are very frustrated. And we are working with the auditor's office, and I provide them with a list, and then they will notate specifically why that is ineligible. And so we do respond back and let them know that the auditors is in the secondary review process now for those initial ineligible. So we are responding individually to those applicants.
I know you are. Thank you.
What do you think about possibly setting up? I mean, we might approach the Fort Worth chapter of CPAs. We might ask them if they would be willing to see if there are some CPAs that would volunteer to look at the appeals, determine they can determine pretty quickly from Renee's notes what she feels like are missing, and may be able to assist in either saying, here's the reason you don't qualify, here's what you need to do. I think
that's the key to successfully completing this next phase of this program.
I know that I was talking with the managing partner of my old firm, and he indicated that they were doing some work, or at least were beginning to talk with the chapter about doing some work about filling out applications. So the only thing I can think of is that might be in response to our next round, or it may be in response to something Fort Worth has going on. But I just believe that we might be able to communicate with them and get some assistance from some of the CPA firms that would be willing to, dedicate maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people.
I know we're getting close to entering. Well, we're really not, I guess, at this point. We're still 3.5 months away from the end of the year. So, yeah, that would make sense. Maybe they would have the time to do that.
I think that's probably a good idea, but Judge, you asked Renee a threshold question. If the appeals process turns out differently from the decision made in your office, are you willing to fund based upon the appeal decision? And there wasn't a overwhelming yes. So I don't.
Excuse me, I did say yes with the appropriate documentation that supported the appeal. That's the only kind of yes I can give you, sir, is if the appellate process means that the person was eligible and you provided me that support for the file, then I would write the check.
I believe that where we are right now is Renee has told us that she doesn't have the people to communicate and walk somebody through the process. I think that if you had a CPA or hell, I mean, these are things that for the most part, bookkeepers. This doesn't require us, a CPA to do this. A bookkeeper can get in there. They can look at what the auditor has said was needed, and very rapidly go and produce that. In the situation that I was talking about with his partner that I referred to, what he was actually indicating is that he would be going into businesses that might not otherwise have a bookkeeper or anyone putting together the information, and that they would help in doing that.
My concern is that a company filing an appeal will probably not have any documentation that is different from what they submitted originally. They're asking for a second opinion. And if that second opinion turns out to be different from the first opinion based on the same documentation, she ain't gonna fund it.
Well, but I think in a lot of situations, they didn't know what documents to send in. She mentioned that there was a number of them where they didn't have the documents, the required documents. So I'm just saying, and I don't know. I mean, if the Fort Worth chapter was, and if firms were willing to give a couple of people in that regard for some period of time, I think they will very rapidly be able to say, this one doesn't have an appeal, this one doesn't have an avenue to appeal, this one does, and will very quickly be able to do it. But I'll plead guilty to the fact that I thought the documentation we were asking for was pretty easy and pretty simple, but I can absolutely guarantee you that some of the people who filled out the application questioned my opinions.
And I would say that it's not quite as simple as you described, sir, even with the bookkeeper, because a lot of it was looking at the various tax documents.
I'm sorry, Renee, can I have you go to the mic? I'm not able to hear you that well. Thank you.
I was just going to comment that it's not quite as simple as it sounds, because we did reach out in each and every instance to try to get additional information or support if we had something that wasn't clear or we didn't have something that we thought we could make a determination on. We didn't just make determinations based on just what we had. We did work, we did reach out to the applicants, we called the applicants, we spoke with the applicants. If they were not able to provide the documentation, or even after our request, the documentation they submitted to us, we didn't think then met the criteria, that's when we determined they were ineligible. So even from some of my folks in the very beginning who were working on the program, because they were not used to seeing various tax forms for the CPAs or people who work in the tax area of accounting, I think it would be a lot easier, because we were using for the most part, government documents where we could to substantiate the loss had been incurred and then to determine the amount of the award. So with that said, again, I don't have any problem with whoever you want to have look at them. I will point out that the only way this system works, though, that we signed up with Denton County through their provider, is you have to go into each applicant's file. There's not a good reporting tool to extract information out of the system, so these people are going to have access and go into the various applicants' files and actually look at the information in the file to be able to review what we saw and what was provided. So, and any of those that are still on the list that were lacking documentation, it's only because we haven't received it. We've asked for it, we've attempted to communicate with the people, but if they haven't provided it, then there's not very many of those. But it's not like we didn't reach out even to the people that are left with the required documentation. It's just a matter of whether or not they incurred the loss as we calculated it or not. That's the majority of the people still ineligible.
So Renee, I want to make sure that I understand. You're saying even if we were to establish some appeals process, we still need guidance from the DA's office on that. What is that specifically?
I was just simply suggesting that if you want to have this discussion with businesses, that we go through the DA's office to make certain that we understand what sort of communication we should have, the type of things that we should tell the businesses. Anytime we had questions, we sought guidance either from the DA's office, we came back to the court, those kinds of things. So that was my only suggestion, and we've not done that because I wasn't sure what the court wanted to do and how they wanted to handle, again, whether or not you had an appeals process. Because if you have the appeals process, then by the time, at that point, you're going to have a very clear determination on whether or not you've deemed that person eligible. The only other thing I'd remind you of, even in Mr. Fickus's example of the business that laid the employees, let them go, if we get that information in and then could qualify them, but they didn't keep the the employees, and another business did, we were also always very concerned about using the exact criteria for each and every application, so we didn't have any bias, so that we wouldn't have looked at one business differently than another. It made no difference to us who they were and what they did. We simply tried to take the definition that we'd been given and apply that. If we've misapplied that, if we missed something, or if the court sees something that the appellate process saw something that we didn't, again, I'm not saying I won't write the check. I'm saying I will. I'm just saying I can't appeal myself because we've already done that by going through these even for a third review.
Okay. Well, and I was going to ask for you to confirm that you had already done 3 passes of a review of these applications.
Yes, ma'am. Before we completely finish, yes, we'll have it 3 different passes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Leslie, do you have a comment for the court?
Yes, Commissioner Allen, just to address one of your questions and another comment made by Commissioner Fickus. I don't see any legal impediment to notifying a business as to why they were not qualified. As far as an appeals process and going into detail and engaging in a dialogue, that's perhaps a different question, but the initial threshold of a notification of why you were not eligible and just simply stating the reason for ineligibility, there is not a legal impediment that I'm aware of that would prevent us from or discourage us from doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, and that will be item number 3. Ms. Camarino is going to be addressing the court at this time.
Good afternoon. I know that most of you are familiar with the NGO funding chart. By this time, for the benefit of Commissioner Allen, who may have missed the last few briefings, I'll go over it quickly. To date, and I'm referring to this chart, I don't know if you can see it, Commissioner Allen, it is in the back of the programs report. Okay. To date, we have reviewed all 150 applicants, so there are 0 in the still under review column. We will be bringing 4 new recommendations and 21 agreements to you today after I finish this briefing. The total amount either recommended or awarded is $6.437 million. So barring any future individual requests that we might entertain, that is the number at this point for the NGO program. Do you have any questions? And I should say that number is made up of 67 organizations who have received funding or will receive funding.
I believe I had someone in my area, Grace.
Yes, sir.
Sent in an email maybe yesterday.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with that email?
I am, and that relates to what GK was, or Mr. Manius was discussing with you earlier, and that is the previous rental expenses that some of the NGOs incurred prior to our rental program, and we are looking at those. There are several things that we need to verify before recommending funding for those expenses. Originally in the NGO program, rental expenses were excluded because we have a rental assistance program. These particular expenses, however, were incurred previous to the launch of our program, which is why we're going to go back and look at them.
Okay, you are going to go back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions about this funding chart? Okay, I'll move into item 3, which is a request for approval of recommended funding amounts for 4 NGOs. Those agencies and the recommended amounts are attached to your court item. The total funding is $255,111.69 for those 4 agencies.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, item 4 is a request for the approval of agreements with 21 NGOs. All NGOs are listed there in your court communication along with the corresponding funding amounts. The total fiscal impact of those 21 agreements is $1,323,125.60.
Now, you still have some organizations that were approved, that were recommended for funding that we don't have agreements on yet.
Yes, sir. There are 15, including those 4 recommended today, and I plan to bring those on the 29th if at all possible.
Okay. Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Members of the court, Ms. Ward is going to present item 5.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve an amended Harris Act rental assistance landlord agreement authorizing the application, approval, and payment processes. And those include the payment of late fees, which is paragraph F. And also, it allows for installment payments beyond rent outlined in the lease agreement. A lot of times when you see a lease agreement, they will include trash, internet, water, and we want to include those installment payments. So every month we're not going through and deducting them out of the lease agreement when we're just paying rent. So we're asking for that approval.
I think it's important that we do this because expenses that are a part of the lease agreement that are not paid still puts the tenant in default. So if we are trying to remove the tenant from default, then we need to pay all lease-related expenses. Everything that is listed in the lease as an expense of the tenant's occupancy of that unit needs to be paid. So I move approval for expansion of our project.
And this will be effective September 1st.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Patricia, do you want to tell the court we received some additional funding through HUD?
Yes. On September 11th, we were not officially notified, but through NACO notified that we have received an additional $3.9 million in CDBG funds. We should receive a letter to the judge's office shortly, and once we have the guidance that comes with that, we will prepare a briefing for the Commissioners Court to give you options on how we can spend that money. Right now, we are looking to be a lot of discussion about ventilation for large shelters, and also for housing that houses homeless people, especially people right now who are ill with COVID and other diseases. So, but we will come back to the court when we're officially notified of the $3.9 million. That brings the total amount of HUD funding to approximately $10 million. We're still waiting on agreements from HUD. We need to make some amendments to our existing programs, and also guidance that will come directly from Washington. Once we receive that, we will brief the court.
I think the
bottom line, an additional $3.9 million, but no guidance on what we can use it for
Not
yet.
at this point. We talked to HUD yesterday for about 2 hours, and they are working on the letter that will come with the funding amount. There will be some waivers that are included in that, but we need to make sure that we have that letter in hand before we do a plan that we ask you to prepare. We'll prepare and ask you to approve.
I think the one thing that's important to note, whenever we get different revenue streams from the feds. So CARES Act came from Treasury, it has a 12/30 deadline to expend. When we get money from HUD, it tends to be more, we have a longer period of time in order to spend that. So we balance those revenue streams to keep the money here as much as possible.
Spend CARES Act money first.
They told us on the phone they're looking at 5 years expenditures and 3 years commitment, but we need to see that in writing. Once we see that in writing, we'll prepare a plan for y'all. Thank you.
Your Honor, that's all we have on our section.
Mr. Garcia, come on down.
Good afternoon, Judge, members of the court. We have 2 items today on the agenda. The first one is we come for approval of the early voting sites for the joint general and special elections on November 3rd. We presented to the court a schedule that has 50 permanent branch locations, including distributed all over the county. And I also make mention in the court communication that we have come up with a contingency plan to activate, if necessary, because of increased turnout, 8 additional locations. And so the way the code reads, we cannot have temporary sites, but we fear that if we were to need additional locations, we could use section 85.067 of the code that allows us to amend the schedule. In real life, we can't just decide in the middle of early voting that we're going to add sites, because we have to confirm sites, we have to determine availability, we have to have machines programmed, we have to have all that decided now. So we decided to include that in the programming, and we would be back in court if we feel that it's necessary to activate those 8 sites.
How many days do we have to?
Sorry?
What lead time as far as the number of days?
5 days.
5 days. So
an amendment to the schedule.
3 weeks of early voting, then conceivably we're looking at maybe the first couple of days. And so unfortunately, I guess, though, early voting begins on a Tuesday.
Correct.
So by the time we get to the next Tuesday, we'll be 10 days away from the end of early voting at that point.
Correct. What I see happening is that if we feel this needs to be revised, I would be here on the Tuesday of the second week of early voting. That gives us more than the 5 days to decide whether we want to activate those 8 sites or not. And those 8 sites were, like I said, distributed around the county. We know historically those 2 days are the heaviest turnout. They double or even triple any day before. The last 2 days. So
if we were to make the decision on that second Tuesday, the second Tuesday of early voting, you would be able to have those sites open by
the following week. So far, what we've done is confirmed availability for those last 2 days. We feel pretty confident with the turnout we've seen, with the increase we've added, and with the machines we leased and all the extra buffer we had, that we should be able to tackle on it. We're worried about those 2 days. If we have any indication that those 2 days may be, let's say, overrun the resources we have out there, that's where we would ask the court, let's play it safe and modify the schedule to add these 8 sites.
Just to refresh my memory, I know we've got 2 weekends that we're open for voting. Is it the first and second, or the second and third?
The second and third, the 2 weekends in between the weeks of early voting. So we started on a Tuesday, that weekend, then another week, a weekend, and then the last week.
So the last weekend's on early voting ends on a Friday.
On a Friday, correct.
Okay, so that was my question. Is it?
Yeah.
It doesn't go over from that standpoint. So we would miss the first weekend. We would come to the second Tuesday.
Correct.
Make the determination at that point in time. Miss that next weekend, not have those additional sites open for that next weekend.
Correct.
But maybe decide to open those sites. It may be the last 2 days, Thursday and Friday, but it could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's whatever we as a court decide.
Yes and no, because I also have to make sure that the locations can host us for almost an entire week. It was quite a challenge. The way we designed this, we said, if we can find 8 locations that are election day locations that will let us set up ahead of time as potential additional early voting locations, we've pre-set up for election day. And not a lot of the schools and library, or I would say schools and churches, are willing, especially churches, to do this, because then you have the weekend in between when they might or might not have a service.
They're going to have that weekend anyway.
Right, but we're not asking them to hold the equipment set up and hold in place during the weekend. We would normally just drop it off and they would be
I
in the
understand
corner.
that, but if you're talking about, whether we're talking about 2 days, Thursday and Friday, or 4 days or 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that shouldn't be different because we're not covering a weekend. So, I mean, as you begin to look at those 8 sites or however many you're looking at, I wouldn't just necessarily limit it to 2 days.
Okay, we'll confirm availability for more time and see if that's doable.
I mean, I'd probably go 3 or 4 days.
Okay, I'll ask.
Any other?
And I'll bring the availability at that point.
Yeah, I've got some questions for you, Hyder. I want to make sure that I understood you. So you said that there are 8 contingency locations. How do we determine the 8 number?
It was a combination of availability of funds available, machines available, the statistic, the turnout we've had in other locations, and where we feel if people take too long to vote or if more people show up than we projected, we may be in a higher probability of an overflow. So we try to identify areas. We did a map with turnout from the past and said, well, if it takes 8 minutes, 9 minutes to vote, where do we see spots turning into the alarming zone, and say there are too many together. One in that area may be helpful, one in this area, and so forth.
Did you go over that with the parties at all?
Yes, they've seen this. Well, I haven't. I know they've seen it, but I haven't gotten anything explicit from them on this matter. I'll circulate it with them before that time.
Okay, I want to make sure that I understand. So we're saying, so early vote starts on Tuesday the 13th. And then we are going to look to see what the turnout is like. And if we're seeing that we need to activate 1 or more up to 8 of the contingency locations, then that determination would be made, and then it would be brought back to court on October 20th. Is that what you're saying?
I'm looking at the calendar.
Yes.
It would be October 20th.
Okay.
October 20. So that we by have those 5 days required by the code section after modifying the schedule, and then we can use those sites on that last week of early voting.
Okay. And so then let's say we need those contingency sites, those sites are brought before court, we approve it, then, and I think the judge was talking about this, but I kind of got lost. So I'm confused rather. So how long would it take to put up those sites? And then, Judge, are you saying that you wanted to extend the amount of time that those sites would be up? The continued sites would be up?
As I understand it, once we approve, it has to be at least 5 days before the sites are put up.
Correct.
Which would be, if we approve it on a Tuesday, then that would be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the earliest that we would put them, that we could open them up, would be Monday the 27th. Monday the 26th.
Correct.
26th, okay.
But what I'm saying is, what Hyder was saying was that the busiest days are typically the last Thursday and Friday of early voting. But what I'm saying is, given this election, we might want to assume that it could be heavy from maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
I see. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Hyder, I have
Yes, sir.
just a couple of questions. We've got a city like North Richland Hills, which is 70,000 plus. It's got 1 voting location. And Grapevine, 50,000, 1 voting location. It looks like Fort Worth's got probably 1 voting location for every 40,000 people, and we're putting 1 per every 70,000, up in my area. I think we're setting ourselves up for a problem.
Okay, what I can tell is that when you look at the map, the way they're distributed, they pretty much cover a lot of territory. Some of them, they're in these corners of Fort Worth that kind of river into other geographical territory. These are the ones people are used to. They know where they are. They frequent them. We try to stick to that. On a side note that is related to the next item, every site on this list except colleges is an election day site. So we kept that trend of making sure that people are familiar with what they've seen so they don't, miss where to go. I can share the map with you, and then if we need to have that conversation, there's an opportunity when we revise that possible amendment of the schedule.
Well, I know that our location and hers, I think we have a room that's divided by, it can make 3 rooms, and we've given you 2 of the 3. You can take all 3 if you've got machines and manpower.
Okay. Well, I'll pass it on to the team and we'll take a look, survey. We've worked with these sites, and most of the entities have been great. Most of them have proactively reached out to us and said, hey, you used to be in this area, just like you said, we got a bigger area, do you want to take it? So we've maximized, in some cases, we've almost doubled the amount of equipment we projected that we needed. We had to have a grant, released an additional 200 machines, but we'll see if we can extend that one in particular.
Hyder,
sure.
We made a great and conscious effort to put early voting sites at all of our colleges and universities. Do all of our colleges and universities now have students on campus?
I do not know, but they all maintain the interest in being there, except TCU because of the impossibility to mandate masks, use of masks to voters.
Say again about
TCU is the only campus where we won't have an early voting site because they said if we couldn't mandate the use of masks for voters to use masks, then they felt that it was a challenge to their.
So we ought to have them at their parties.
Sir?
So we ought to have them at their parties where they don't care about whether they wear masks.
It's a private facility. We, found a replacement site in the area, and that's pretty much all I can say.
Yeah, but I'll say the rest.
Well, I did just want to add on your review of the changes for, I'm sorry, actually, I think that's the next agenda item. Yeah, never mind. I'll wait.
Any other questions?
I move we approve these sites.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The second item is the approval of the election day polling location changes for the joint general and special elections to be conducted on November 3rd. So we stuck to the plan that the court approved last year when we decided to join the vote centers. We went for the same 340 sites. We were able to confirm, and they're listed in the communication, 332. That's one more than we had last year in November. Not all the sites are exactly the same from last year. One of the 2 attachments you have to the communication is the list of changes and why those locations were moved. In some cases, we had a better room. In some cases, they were private facilities that were not available. That's the general summary of it. So we're going into this November with 332 locations with those changes. That's what I have.
Questions?
I don't have a question, just a comment that in reviewing the changes for the precinct 2 locations, I understand why the changes had to be made, and I haven't received any concerns or anything in terms of what was posted about this from constituents. So with that, I'd like to move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I know that this is not on the agenda, so I want to be careful not to creep, but I would like either for you to come back and talk with us about the vote by mail and basically what all that we're doing to ensure that we have increasing access for folks with it being a presidential election year, but then also because of COVID.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, well,
okay.
I'll reach out.
Thank you.
Go ahead, you might talk a little bit. From a standpoint of today, let's just talk a little bit about where we are preparing for early voting, preparing for the mail-out ballots.
Okay.
Just talk to us about the
So we have, I was just looking at the report, we have almost 45,000 annual requests in the queue, and I was just asking my staff for the non-annual, so I'm statistically speaking, I'm sure we're somewhere around 48,000 ballots that are just waiting to be printed and put in the mail. Our plan right now is to put them in the mail on September 25th. We are in the middle of public testing, so what's happening it started yesterday and it'll continue till Friday, is that we are printing one of each ballot, voting for every candidate and every precinct, scanning everything and making sure that the result that comes out is what we marked on those papers, right? So in essence, we are making sure that the information we put into the voting system is accurate and that we didn't make any mistakes. Parties are also, and stakeholders have been given ballots to sign off and say, yep, my name's spelled correctly, and all of that is what's happening right now. Once we do that, Friday is our deadline, Saturday is our deadline, 45 days before the election, to put ballots in the mail for voters overseas. So that's the first thing we print for those who didn't choose an electronic delivery, which is basically an email. And then after that starts the printing for voters, domestic voters within U.S. territory. So we are going to use, because of the volume, the contract that we entered into with the certified print shop. We're going to turn over the data to them this Friday or this Saturday, and so they're going to print those 50,000 for us and put them in the mail on the 25th or the 24th, depending on if they can finish the job a day ahead. After that, we'll start getting daily mail, and depending on how much mail we get a day, we might do it in-house, or we might ask for what we call a supplemental run. So we got 3,000 names in a day. We might tell the vendor, you know what, here's another 3,000. You turn them around in 2 days and put them in the mail. Or we might say, you know what, it's actually quicker if we do it in-house. So we're going to be looking at what's coming in daily from that point on. We received our mail sorter this week. It's been physically assembled in our office, so we're in the process of testing and configuring and all of that. So when all that mail comes back, we should be fine in terms of being able to deal with the volume. And we also received all the equipment we bought with the HAVA grant, the additional stations. So we're going to have more terminals for the ballot board to process signatures and do all the work that they need to do. So we're pretty confident right now with the volume we're seeing and the resources we're able to acquire. I don't know if that answers the question.
And you are still planning to have a drive-through mail-in ballot drop-off?
Correct, and that's important to highlight for everyone. There's some talk out there, and I want to clarify it for everyone. Voters who are mailed a ballot can return it the day they get it. It's not just during early voting. So if we put them in the mail on the 25th, and someone gets it on the 29th, and they want to drive down to our office on the 29th and return it, they can do it that day, even though early voting hasn't started. There's nothing in the proclamation that limits when voters can return the ballot in person. Keep in mind, every person can only return their own ballot, and you have to show ID when you come to our office. What Commissioner Brooks is mentioning, and we've talked about it, is we're going to put together a kind of a drive-through process, because these in-person deliveries are going to coincide at some point with early voting in our office and with our staff driving trucks in and out to deliver equipment. So we've also used the HAVA grant funds to buy 2 drive-through tents that we're going to set up in a specific area so that people can just, without getting out of their car, roll down your window, show me your ID, sign the roster, give me your ballot, carry on.
But since, I mean, there was recently an article that said, okay, the day you get your ballot, fill it out, and then drive it back in and deliver it. That is not going, all that's going to do is guarantee that your ballot got back.
Correct.
It is not, I mean, our people do nothing to validate signatures. I mean, once that ballot comes back in, it's set aside for the ballot board.
That is correct. It goes through the same process.
And for the signature verification committee, neither of which do our employees participate in.
That's correct. It will go through the same process as any ballot that has been mailed back.
So all that's going to happen is our persons in that tent, well, the big difference between the ones that are in that tent and the ones that come via mail is that the ones come via mail, nobody looks or requires or is
checks ID
or to check an ID.
Correct.
That's just, at that point, that ballot is simply put into the securely placed in a room where is only accessible by, well, we've got controls over who can get into the room.
Yep.
If somebody comes in and delivers that ballot, then at that point in time, they have to also produce the ID
yes.
to verify that they are, but that still doesn't mean that their ballot might not be kicked out.
Correct. It has to go through the same signature.
The point is that if you put that ballot in the mail, you have no idea whether the elections office ever received it. If you drive it out there yourself and hand it to the elections office, you know they got it.
And that's definitely the best way to do it, because it also, they'll know that it got into the mail, got into the elections. They'll know they got into the elections building. They still won't know whether it's counted or not.
So one of the projects we had that we bid out was a ballot tracking system, so that people could get, subscribe and get text messages like when you buy something online and it says your package is on the way, your package is at your doorstep, and so forth. That bid didn't go through. We only received one offer, and it was no good. I don't want to get ahead of it. I know that our IT team is doing a tremendous effort. If they are able to push through, there will be something on the website where people can at least not sit and wait for the message to come in, but at least go on the website and ask the website, did my ballot make it there? I don't want to promise that right now. They're making a real stretch to try to accomplish that, and that would be a pleasant surprise if they can wrap it up in the next 2 weeks. And so basically, anyone who mails a ballot back, who decides not to drive it but put it in the mail, will be able to go to the website 2, 3, 5 days later and say, did my ballot make it? And it would show it was received on this day.
But will that require them to be able to read the writing on the envelope?
No, they're all barcoded, and so the minute it comes in.
So you know who it was?
Yeah. It's basically posting the same data that we have internally to make sure the ballot's here, and that we share with the poll book so you don't vote in person and vote twice on the website. But not a promise. It's a huge effort that we're trying to fit in there.
And from a legislative standpoint, we talked a little bit earlier. Why don't you go into things that could disrupt the mailing out or create problems with those already mailed out?
There is a case right now in the courts to my understanding, I don't speak legalese, but my reading of it was the Green Party was kicked off the ballot and they're fighting to get back on the ballot. Now, as I just said, we're testing everything this week. If they win the case and they have to be put on in their statewide races, basically the entire state of Texas is going to have to remake and retest every ballot, all the work that everyone is doing right now. So I just shared some emails and messages with other counties, and they're all going through the same. Some of them are stopping their programming. Some of them are just cruising through and waiting what happens. If that happens, we have to revisit and decide whether we push through with the mailing on the 25th or we hold on to it for another week to remake all of this. By law, we have to mail a corrected ballot to everyone. So if we mail either a ballot that doesn't have candidates for the Green Party, and then they win the case and they have to be put on the ballot, we have to mail a second ballot. And so we're talking now about 50,000 mail ballots that we may not have to remake because we got an upgrade on the system, but we're basically needing to immediately turn around and reprint 50,000 ballots. And so that hits our plan for supplies and for a lot of things. So let's find out a little bit more. But we may play it to the limit, the legal limit of we have to get those ballots out in the mail no later than October 3rd. So between the 25th of September and October 3rd, we may choose to delay it a little bit just to see if we can avoid that reprint, or we can get a decision and know that we don't have to remake all the ballots.
So any court decision, Leslie, that comes after October 3rd is moot?
While she walks up here, my understanding, not necessarily. The judge
Not
can say,
necessarily.
mail a corrected
You
ballot.
have to mail them by October 3rd.
Yes, and if there's a correction after the 3rd, I am mandated to mail a corrected ballot out.
Which will then be appealed to the Court of Appeals, which will then be appealed to
Right, but my
the Supreme
obligation-
Court, and next January, we'll figure out what the answer is.
Right. So let's say that I mail, and I'll be listening in a minute. Let's say that I mail out a ballot, and GK's name was misspelled, and he goes to the court. We have to mail out a corrected ballot to the voter. The voter is entitled. The court says, "Hey, you messed up something. You need to mail the voter a corrected ballot." Just right. So that's not something we can choose not to do. And so that's where we go into this. That's what we're trying to avoid, trying to correct ballots, whether it's because we made an error on the data or because we're mandated to.
What's it going to cost us to print and mail 50,000 ballots?
Around $50,000, I would say. If I recall well, the bid was about $1 something per ballot.
So
Without the postage.
potentially, a court decision after October 3rd, when we have had to mail ballots, a court decision that requires us to send corrected ballots, could cost us an additional $50,000.
50 or 100. I'm pretty sure the dollar something doesn't include the postage. Mail it out. So talking $75,000, $100,000.
Do we know how many candidates may have been not allowed on the ballot in Texas? Have we explored that? Because that case was a case it was a case someplace else, wasn't it? That wasn't a Texas case.
Like I
What
said,
you're saying, it was a national election, so it's the Green Party for president, or is it, what are we talking
no,
about?
I think it's a U.S. Senate candidacy. It's a Texas candidacy, statewide in Texas. Like I said, I got the email and I've been trying to crunch through them while I was waiting. But right now, what we know is that we need to wait for the court, and we need the state. I'm pretty sure it's a Texas case because the Secretary of State actually did say something. We expect to have a decision, to see a decision soon. That's what they
Okay.
shared with us. So
Keep us
that's a
informed.
potential risk there. I'll keep the court posted on it, informed on it. I don't know if I got ahead of your answer.
So I guess the other question is that a court decision, or where does the election board come into play in this regard, if anywhere? The election board's just, I guess, responsible over the counting.
That's correct. This would be a judicial determination as to what has to occur.
Okay.
And then they would be mandated to follow the court's order. And like you said, there could be an injunctive relief. It's hard to predict.
Yep. All right, thank you. Anybody have any other questions for Hyder?
No, wouldn't dare.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Gonna be getting a little sleep.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion second to receive and file personnel agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We talked a little bit last week, and I know we voted last week to not give any of our elected officials raises. I will tell you, I'm very proud of our employees. Many of them have approached me and said, golly, we really weren't expecting an increase. I've talked with some department heads. I said it last week, and I want to stress that I hope that as department heads and as elected officials are looking at their other employees, that they look at maybe the 3%, and might even consider for some of those individuals that are making in excess of $60,000 or $70,000 about not at least talking with employees and giving them the opportunity to say, we're pretty happy with the fact that we've got a job and going forward with that. I thought about putting out a memo to that effect. I know Ann sent out the salary information, but I know, again, I've been humbled by the number of employees who've come up and said, we didn't even expect to get anything.
Yeah, and I think I shared with you, Judge, that I've had employees say the same thing to me in my department and outside of my department. So,
as you kind of look at that, I just hope we look at that and maybe take that into account and see where we are and see what that ends up. I don't know from a budget standpoint where that would end up leaving us, but just looking at that and listening to some of our employees too. Thank you. Vinny, you got anything for us? Too bad. Tell these people to wait next time until you come back out.
Thanks for having me back. One item under public health for your consideration this afternoon. So we're requesting approval of a memorandum of understanding with the City of Arlington for access to our Tarrant County Public Health COVID-19 database. They have a local health authority who's been pretty active in this whole COVID situation, and we've been sharing some information back and forth with her, and now they've hired an epidemiologist, so we're trying to make sure they have access to their data and they can help us with the contact tracing in Arlington.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, come on down. Looks like you're going to be here for a while.
We have 11 items for your consideration today. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2020-116. It's an RFP for Drug Court Program Cannabis Youth Therapy Family Support Network. Recommendation would be to award to Santa Fe Youth Services, the amount of $115,500. If the court approves this, we're also seeking contract approval.
Move approval.
Approval.
Second.
Wasn't there something in, was this, I must, somewhere or another, I wrote down the wrong item that you said we were going to hold until the 29th?
That's in
Transportation. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 2 is also a bid award recommendation for RFP 2020-142, RFP for outpatient sex offending treatment services for juvenile services. Recommendation to award to the two vendors is shown in the court communique for amount not to exceed $136,000. Again, if this is approved, we're seeking contract approval from the court.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2020-167. This is a contract for preventative maintenance and repair of standby generators. Recommendation would be to award a per enterprise basis, hourly labor rate, and parts markup, awarding to the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors as shown in court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 4 is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2020-174, signing a contract for police package vehicles. Our recommendation would be to award on a per enterprise basis, awarding to the 14 primary vendors as shown in your court communique for certain items.
I have a question. Or do we need a motion?
Let's get a motion in a second first. So you're not going to ask your question? Unless there's a
I
motion?
can. I thought you were going to.
Are you going to move? You going to move?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Jack, how long does it normally take when you have this, like for an automobile, police car? When this comes out and we approve it, how long does it take for that car to hit the street? Because I got a problem with a constable in a car. We've been waiting on over a year. Precinct 3.
It didn't take us that long. Well, I take that back. All the manufacturers are having difficulties. What happens, if you'll notice, in years past, we started putting this out earlier and earlier and earlier to have it approved by Commissioner
Is a year normal?
The last, I will tell you, and I wish Joy Lee was here.
I've been told the car is here, been here for months.
Well,
what's the problem?
Some of that's a transportation department issue, and that they have to be outfitted. Deliveries, I will tell you that there's one vehicle, I believe it's for facilities, that we've had on order for 2 years. The manufacturer stopped making them. Police cars, police package vehicles, that's not the case, although they have delayed the delivery of those vehicles. It's never been like this in the 49 years I've been in public purchasing. It's terrible.
Can you check into this for?
Is it for Precinct 3, Constable?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Same one I've talked to you about.
Well, we'll go ahead and run that traffic, and I know that when we initially spoke, we hadn't gotten the vehicle in yet, from my understanding.
Well, my understanding, the car's been in. I don't know what the deal is, but I want to see it on the street.
Well, we'll just send our guy over to ask the question.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 5 is a bid award recommendation for bid number 2020-176, signing a contract for temporary clerical personnel for use countywide. Recommendation be to award a per enterprise basis, awarding to the primary, secondary, alternate 1 and 2 vendors as shown in court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 6 is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2020-178, annual contract for elevator maintenance, repair, and replacement parts.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Hallelujah. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Phillips indicated he was going to call in and recommend something else, but I told him that probably wouldn't be a good idea.
Moving right along.
Item number 7, bid award recommendation for bid 2021-92, annual contract for aggregate road surface treatment. Recommendation be to award on per enterprise basis, awarding to the 2 primary vendors as shown in court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 8 is a bid award recommendation for bid 2022-06, annual contract for seating work services for our WIC clinics. Recommendation would be to award a per enterprise basis discount from list price, awarding Group 1 2 and 3 for guest chairs and alternate guest chairs.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 9, an item in regards to RFP 2020-182, RFP for electronic procurement system. We received 14 proposals. We are recommending rejection of all proposals and seeking to rebid with revised specifications.
So moved.
What happened?
We had people that...
Second. Well, what happened?
We had people that didn't sign the addendums. We had firms that turned in outdated forms, not the right forms. Felt like it would be better to try it again and simplify it.
All 14 of them?
No, but it would have been a costly endeavor. Some of the major players we felt like had major issues.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 10, item in regards to RFP 2020-199. This is an RFP for a ballot tracking solution for elections administration. We received one proposal. It was more an asset rather than a ballot tracking solution. I understand that there is a solution available on DIR for about $5,000, and we'd like to reject this one and go that direction.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote.
I do. I just want to make sure I understand. This is what Heidi was just talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
How quickly can you get it?
Sir?
How
What was that?
quickly can you get it?
Pretty quickly off DIR.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Last item in regards to RFP 2019-143. This is more of a housekeeping item. This was originally brought to Commissioner Court on May 21st, 2019. It was an RFP for historical preservation plan. Due to COVID, the National Park Service granted permission, this is grant funded by the way, to extend the deadline of this project until February 1, 2021. On the 11th of August 2020, we brought to the court the paperwork, the contract amendment form. We'd like to ask for an extension of that contract until the granted February 1, 2021 date.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
you. Are there any appointments today? And you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I think we are now going to recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under section 551, 1071, 072, 074, 076, 087 of the Texas Government Code. Having returned from closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we are adjourned.